Hello, and welcome. You've come to a place where time slows down, where stories are told softly, and nothing needs to be remembered. This is Boring History for Sleep, and tonight we begin a quiet journey through how people have slept through the ages. So settle in, let the world fade, let your breath slow, and let's begin. Long before beds, before bedrooms, before bedtime routines, there was sleep. Sleep in its rawest form. Sleep as part of the earth. People laid down when the light faded and woke when the sky turned pale. In those earliest days, long before writing or clocks, humans lived close to the rhythms of the sun. Daylight meant movement. Darkness meant rest. No one needed reminders to sleep. The body simply knew. When the sun disappeared, the land turned quiet. Fire was their only light. It danced softly across the walls of caves or simple shelters. The air grew cool, and families huddled together, wrapped in animal skins, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of night. Their beds were made of what was near: leaves, dried grass, perhaps moss piled in a dry corner. Some slept directly on the earth. And yet, despite the simplicity, sleep came. In that world, there were no mattresses, no pillows, no soft blankets from stores. But there was stillness. And in that stillness, sleep arrived like a slow breath. Sometimes people didn't sleep through the night in one long stretch. They slept in two parts. First sleep began not long after dusk. Then, after a few hours, they would wake, not fully, just enough to stir the fire, look into the dark, or speak softly with someone nearby. This quiet time in the middle of the night was peaceful. It wasn't something they feared or tried to fix. They might pray. They might think. And after a while, they drift into second sleep, a deeper, longer rest that lasted until morning. This pattern, known today as segmented sleep, was once very normal. It matched the pace of life, unhurried, natural, calm. As centuries passed, people built homes, not grand houses, but simple shelters. Mud walls, wooden beams, thatched roofs. Inside, the family would sleep close together for warmth. There were no private bedrooms, no doors to close. Children slept beside their parents. Elders were nearby. Even small animals, like goats or chickens, might share the space on colder nights. The fire stayed lit through the darkness. Its glow gave comfort, its heat protection. And in that shared space, sleep was communal. People curled into one another. They shared blankets or what passed for them, woven cloth, tanned hides, or layered wool. In colder climates, they wrapped their feet. In warmer ones, they slept beneath open windows or under stars. The sounds of night were familiar. Crickets, owls, wind moving through the grass. Occasionally, a dog would bark in the distance. But mostly, it was quiet. So quiet that even a breath could be heard across the room. Sleep in this world was not measured. There were no questions like, "Did you get enough?" No alarms, no calendars, no sleep trackers. The day's end brought rest, and the body took what it needed. In villages, people might gather around the fire to tell stories before sleep. These weren't exciting tales. They were gentle ones, of ancestors, of seasons, of the stars above. Their voices would lower, their words would slow, and then, one by one, they'd fall silent. The fire would flicker, the air would grow still, and sleep would come. In some regions, beds were raised off the ground. Wooden frames were built to keep away insects or dampness. On these frames, straw was laid, and over it, cloth or skins. Still not luxurious, but enough. In poorer homes, people simply spread mats across the floor. Children were tucked beside their parents. Everyone fit where they could. Sleep didn't depend on comfort. It depended on routine. Some lit a candle or small lamp before bed, but most let the firelight guide them. As darkness deepened, their eyes grew heavy. And so, without fuss, they slept. Dreams weren't discussed much. They came and went. Sometimes remembered, often not. But in the quiet of those nights, with nothing buzzing or glowing nearby, the dreams might have been clearer. The stars above turned slowly, the world breathed gently, and in their sleep they found a kind of peace that required no explanation. No rules, no tricks, just rest. So now as we lie here, perhaps in a bed, perhaps on a couch, perhaps with headphones or a soft pillow nearby, we return to that time. A time when sleep was part of the day, not separate from it. A time when closing your eyes didn't feel like a task. It felt like coming home. There will be more stories of how people slept in castles and cottages, in cities and on ships. But for now, this is enough. Let the world be quiet. Let your thoughts grow slow. And let sleep find you.
Sleep, for most of human history, happened without effort. It wasn't something people had to chase or schedule or manage. It simply arrived when the sky dimmed and the day's weight became too much to carry. Let's stay with that feeling a little longer. Imagine a small home, wooden walls, packed dirt floors, and a roof made from straw and clay. Smoke from the fire rises slowly toward a hole in the roof. It carries the smell of cooked grain and warm ash. In one corner, a thin mattress made of straw lies on a wooden frame. There's no headboard, no sheets, just a woolen blanket, patched and worn, folded over to keep in the warmth. Two people rest there, curled beside one another. A child lies nearby, swaddled in fabric, snoring softly. They are not wealthy. They are not poor. They are simply part of the rhythm. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the walls. It sighs through the trees, and a dog, somewhere in the distance, barks once, then falls silent. No one stirs, because sleep has already done its work. It has settled over the room like a second blanket. In this time, in this world, sleep wasn't always a single event. Many people slept in 2 shifts, a practice that lasted centuries. The first sleep might begin shortly after nightfall. It would last a few hours, deep and undisturbed. Then people would naturally wake. But they didn't panic. They didn't worry. It wasn't insomnia. They'd rise quietly, tend to the fire, whisper to one another. This time, between sleeps, was called the watch. It was peaceful, still, a time for reflection, prayer, or simply quiet thought. And then, as the embers cooled and the dark deepened, they'd return to bed for the second sleep, the deeper one, the dream-rich one. By dawn, they would rise again, but not sharply, not in a rush. They'd stir like leaves in a morning breeze, stretch, yawn, sit in silence before moving into the day. This pattern was natural, expected. It shaped their evenings and their mornings. It was neither strange nor broken. In towns, the soundscape of sleep was different, more crowded. Wooden buildings pressed close together, shared walls, footsteps above, whispers below. Candles flickered through shuttered windows. A merchant turned in bed, muttering about coins. A child cried in a neighbor's home. A woman hummed a lullaby to quiet her youngest. And yet, despite the closeness, people slept. Sometimes they used sleep stones, smooth rocks warmed in the fire and wrapped in cloth, to keep their feet from freezing. Other times they slept with gloves or hats on, especially during long winters. In wealthier homes, beds were larger, with curtains to block out drafts and light. Feathers filled their mattresses, fine linen draped from the canopy. But the sleep itself wasn't so different. Rich or poor, people still dreamed, still turned in their rest, still welcomed the stillness of the night. In warmer regions, sleep happened outdoors during hot seasons. People would lay on rooftops or in courtyards beneath the stars. Mosquito nets, woven by hand, hung over the beds, and the night wind cooled the skin like water. Even in grand palaces, the rhythms remained. A noble might read a book by candlelight. A servant might pad softly through the hall, collecting dishes left from a late meal. But soon, the lamps were snuffed, and the silence took over. Some traditions made room for sleep in the middle of the day, too. A nap after lunch, a pause in the afternoon, especially in hotter climates where the sun ruled the middle hours. This habit, what we now call a siesta, wasn't laziness. It was wisdom. It was balance. Because when you wake before dawn and sleep after dusk, a short rest during the heat feels natural, right. And the world around them accepted this. Shops closed. Streets grew quiet. Even the animals rested. Sleep, you see, wasn't always a thing to push aside. It was welcomed. It was honored. There were fewer distractions. No glowing screens. No clocks blinking numbers at you. The night belonged to sleep, and sleep belonged to the night. Even when danger loomed, raiders, wolves, the unknown, people found ways to rest. A watchman would stay awake. A dog would guard the door. And inside, under thick blankets or woven mats, others would let go. Let their minds drift. Let their thoughts fade. Some believed dreams held messages. Others believed they were just, shadows of the day. But most didn't think too much about them. They accepted them, like the wind, like the stars. And so, night after night, century after century, people slept. Not always comfortably, not always safely, but eventually. They closed their eyes, took slow breaths,
listened to the night, and surrendered. Let's stay with that feeling. Let the hum of the past surround you, not with noise, but with quiet. There is more to come, more places to explore, more ways people slept. But for now, breathe and rest.
As people slowly moved from wandering to settling, sleep began to take on new shapes. Shapes shaped by walls, by hearths, by families gathered under one roof. The bed was no longer just the ground. It became something slightly more planned, though still far from luxurious. In early farming villages, life followed the land. When the sun rose, people rose. When the sky darkened, they returned home, their bodies tired from labor in the fields. And sleep was not a reward, but a rhythm. Homes were simple, just 1 or 2 rooms made of mud brick or packed earth, a fire in the center, a few tools hung on the walls, a pot, a stool, perhaps a shelf. There were no bedrooms, no privacy. Everyone slept in the same space. Parents, children, elders, even the family's animals sometimes curled up nearby. Sleep happened in groups. It was not quiet or still. It was full of small movements. A cough, a snore, the shifting of limbs, the rustling of cloth, someone turning over, someone rising to tend the fire. It was sleep shared, not only in space, but in sound. The bedding itself was rough, mats made of woven reeds, straw laid thin on the floor, maybe a blanket or two made of wool or skins, if the family was lucky. Children nestled close to their parents. The elderly often took the warmer corners. No one had their own bed. They shared what they had, and they made do. And yet, despite the roughness, or maybe because of it, people slept deeply. Their days were full of motion. Their muscles were sore, and their feet calloused, their hands stained with work. By the time night came, sleep was not elusive. It was expected. It arrived without struggle. There were no bedtime routines, no brushing teeth, no dimming lights. When the meal was done and the fire burned low, people simply lay down. The flicker of flames cast soft shadows on the walls. The night sounds filtered in. Crickets, distant dogs, the sigh of wind across the thatch. And slowly, one by one, eyes closed. Some slept curled tightly, knees drawn in. Others stretched out, arms beneath their heads. Some murmured quietly before slipping into dreams. There were no pillows, no need. A folded cloth or a bundle of straw would do. They did not complain. This was sleep, and it was enough. The middle of the night belonged to no one and everyone. Some would wake for a time. They might not rise, but they would think or speak softly, perhaps turn towards someone beside them. These were quiet hours, still and calm. There was no urgency, no expectation, just a gentle pause before the second sleep began. In colder regions, families layered more. They wore their clothes to bed, wrapped their feet, covered their heads. They sometimes brought in embers to warm small clay pots, which they placed beneath blankets. It helped, just a little, to take the chill away. In warmer places, they opened windows, or had none at all. The air moved slowly over their skin. Nights might be noisy with insects or animals, but the rhythm of life carried on. People adapted to heat and dust, to wind and rain. And still, they slept. Sleep, by this time, was still not seen as something separate. It was part of living. It followed the sun, the moon, the seasons. People did not worry about sleep. They simply allowed it. They did not measure it in hours,
They did not speak of it as broken or restless. They accepted it in whatever form it came. In some cultures, dreams were considered messages, signs from beyond, a glimpse of something hidden. But these beliefs varied. Most people did not hold tightly to dreams. They came and went, like wind over the fields, soft, fleeting, sometimes forgotten by morning. As tools improved and weaving became more common, some households managed to craft sleeping mats or simple beds raised slightly off the floor. These beds were built from wood, with ropes or reeds stretched across the frame. A bundle of straw rested on top, then a cloth covering. It kept them off the cold ground, away from insects and dampness. But even these were shared. A single bed might hold 2 or 3 people. There was no idea of my space. Sleep was communal. And with it came a certain quiet comfort. The sound of breathing, the warmth of another body, the steady crackle of a fire, a child's sigh in the dark. And in the morning, people rose not by clocks, but by light. The room brightened slowly, pale and soft. Birds stirred. The fire, now ashes, gave off the last of its warmth. Children blinked open their eyes. Elders shifted in their blankets. The day had begun. Sleep ended not with alarm, but with motion, a slow return to waking. Someone sat up. Another reached for water. Quiet greetings were shared. The room filled with the sound of footsteps, the clang of a pot, the soft scrape of a spoon. The world stirred again. And no one asked, "Did you sleep well?" Because sleep was not judged. It was simply part of life. There were no worries about sleep cycles or patterns, no fear of insomnia. If someone awoke in the night, they might listen to the wind or watch the shadows dance, then close their eyes once more. No pressure, no hurry, just rest. And in this way, people lived and slept for centuries, quietly, together, with no fuss, no fanfare. Sleep was not something to fix, it was something to welcome. And even now, as we lie here in this modern world, with our soft pillows and warm rooms, maybe there's something comforting in knowing that sleep has always been there. Through cold and warmth, through silence and sound, through the press of time and the ease of stillness, sleep returns, again and again, just as it always has.
As time moved forward and communities grew, sleep began to take on new patterns, shaped by work, seasons, and even belief. People began organizing their spaces with more intention. Walls divided homes, roofs were better built, and still, sleep remained something soft, unspoken, shared. In ancient villages and towns, people often lived in multi-generational homes. Grandparents, parents, and children all under one roof. Space was limited, and privacy was rare. A single room might serve every purpose: cooking, eating, talking, resting, and yes, sleeping. The fire still burned in the center of life. Its light remained the soft heartbeat of the home. Before sleep, people would gather around it, not for entertainment, but for comfort. They spoke in low tones, shared what they had, repaired a shoe, stirred a pot. Then, slowly, silence grew. Children would fall asleep first, curled into someone's side. Elders would stretch out close to the fire, their joints stiff, their hands worn from years of tending. The middle of the room might be the warmest, and that warmth was passed from body to body, quietly. Some families placed beds or platforms in corners. Others still slept on mats they rolled up each morning. No space was unused.
Sleep, like every part of life, had to be flexible, and people adapted. In towns near rivers or mountains, the sounds of nature became part of the night. A stream's steady trickle, a breeze through trees, the soft call of birds roosting. In more crowded villages, it might be footsteps on packed dirt, the low bark of a dog, the sound of a gate creaking closed. Sleep came anyway. No matter the setting, the human body sought rest. When the sky darkened, candles or oil lamps gave just enough glow to move about, but fuel was precious. Most homes chose darkness, and in that gentle dark, eyes adjusted and minds slowed. There were no sleep masks, no blackout curtains. People welcomed the moonlight when it spilled through a window, and sometimes arranged their mats so they could see the stars. The sky, above all, was the one constant, watching over sleep, marking its hours. Some homes placed herbs near sleeping spaces: lavender, mint, sweet rushes, or dried leaves. They believed certain scents could calm the mind, ease breathing, soften dreams. It was not science, it was tradition, and tradition shaped sleep for many generations. In colder regions, beds grew slightly more advanced. People began stuffing sacks with straw or feathers, if they could afford it. These sacks were laid atop wooden frames or benches. It was not soft by modern standards, but it lifted the sleeper off the floor, kept the cold from seeping in. Woolen blankets were woven thick, animal hides added warmth, and over time, certain areas developed sleeping clothes, long tunics or robes worn at night, not for fashion, but for function. They helped the body stay warm without many layers of heavy bedding. Even with these changes, most people still slept together. A couple, a parent and child, a small group curled close in winter. It was normal. It was comforting. A shared breath in the dark reminded them that they were not alone. As towns grew into early cities, sleep became more shaped by noise. Vendors shouting late into the evening, bells ringing in the distance, the clatter of carts on stone streets. People learned to tune it out, or to sleep in shifts if work demanded it. Not everyone could sleep when night fell. Bakers, millers, guards, some kept watch, prepared food, or kept fires going. They became used to broken sleep, to resting in short stretches. Their bodies adjusted. They found moments of stillness where they could. And even when sleep was interrupted, it was not seen as failure. There was no shame in waking during the night. Some used those hours to think, to pray, to simply lie quietly and let time pass. Second sleep would follow. In religious households, bedtime might include a prayer or blessing, a sign of protection, a whispered wish for peace. These rituals varied across cultures, but shared a purpose: to mark the space between waking and sleeping with intention, with care. Beds in some homes were now passed down through generations: a carved frame, a wool-filled mattress, a handmade quilt. They were not just furniture, they were memory, resting places for grandparents, now used by children. The mattress might be lumpy, the quilts worn thin, but the feeling of safety, that stayed. Outside, the stars turned slowly. The air cooled. Lamps were snuffed, doors barred, and inside, the soft hush of breathing returned, the language of sleep, simple, steady. People still dreamed, sometimes of lost things, sometimes of nothing at all. In those hours, minds wandered freely, untethered by clocks or demands. And in the morning, the dreams drifted away like mist, half remembered, half imagined. With dawn, sleep gave way to motion, to tasks waiting, to food to prepare. The house stirred slowly, stretching from the inside out. And no one asked how many hours were slept, because it didn't matter. Sleep had done what it always did. It returned the body to stillness, it carried the mind through the night, and it left gently, like a friend who never said goodbye. That perhaps was the quiet magic of sleep in those days.
As the centuries passed and societies grew more complex, sleep began to be shaped not just by the rhythm of nature, but by the rhythm of human labor. In the medieval world, sleep was a necessity, but it was rarely a luxury. The day was long and full of work. From sunup to sundown, people toiled, plowing fields, tending animals, weaving, cooking, repairing. And when the light faded, the body often needed no coaxing. It was ready. For most, the home was still a single room, sometimes with a loft above or a cellar below. Thick stone or mud walls, thatched roofs, and wooden beams held the space together. And at night, families still gathered close, sharing warmth, breath, and sleep. Beds had become more common, but still far from what we know today. A wooden frame, a rope lattice to support a stuffed sack filled with straw, feathers if one was lucky, or even rags. The phrase "sleep tight" came from this world, where ropes had to be tightened regularly to keep the bed from sagging. Blankets were heavy and handmade, wool often scratchy, quilts stitched from old garments. Sheets, when they existed, were coarse linen. There was no thread count to boast of, no duvets or memory foam, just layers to keep the cold out and the warmth in. And yet, despite the discomforts, sleep came. The medieval night was longer than ours. In winter, darkness stretched across nearly 2/3 of the day. Without artificial light, people adapted. They rose with the sun, slept when it was gone. Candlelight was expensive. Firewood had to be gathered and rationed. Most people went to bed not long after dusk, not because they were lazy, but because there was little else to do. And so, the tradition of first sleep and second sleep continued. A few hours of rest, a waking period in the quiet middle hours, and then more sleep until dawn. During that waking time, sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning, people did not panic about being awake. They accepted it. It was normal. Some might rise to relieve themselves, stoke the fire, check on animals. Others remained in bed, whispering to their partner, praying softly, or simply listening. In wealthier homes, separate bedrooms began to appear. A luxury, certainly, and not always for privacy. Sometimes it was just about temperature. The kitchen was warmer, the upper rooms drafty. Beds were piled with furs or thick tapestries to hold in the heat. A noble might have a canopy bed, not for decoration, but to shield from cold air and falling insects. Curtains were drawn around it, creating a tiny world of warmth and darkness. And inside, even in the grandest houses, sleep remained very human. Servants often slept nearby, sometimes on floors or benches. Children were placed in side beds or trundle beds. The idea of sleeping alone was rare. Most people slept within arm's reach of someone else. And outside, the world kept its rhythms. A wolf's cry in the distance, wind rattling shutters, snow falling on the roof. Sounds that reminded sleepers they were still part of the natural world, even as walls thickened and rooms multiplied. Dreams during this time were often seen as messages from God, from ancestors, from the unseen world. People spoke of them cautiously, sometimes recording them in journals or sharing them with priests. But most dreams were forgotten by morning, carried away like smoke. In monasteries, sleep was different. Monks followed a strict schedule. Prayers at dawn, mid-morning, noon, dusk, and in the deep hours of night. They slept in short shifts, rising in the cold, silent corridors, chanting by candlelight, then returning to their narrow beds for a few more hours of rest.
Their lives were shaped by devotion, but also discipline. And that discipline extended to sleep. Simple beds, thin blankets, no indulgence. Just enough rest to carry out the day's work in humility. Peasants, in contrast, might have longer sleep, but less comfort. A bed shared by many, a roof that leaked, a floor of packed earth. Yet their dreams, like those of the monks, came quietly in the same still darkness. In cities, the night brought different sounds. Bells marking the hours, drunkards in alleys, the creak of a cart long after sunset. Sleep there was often lighter, interrupted, but it still came. And when it did, it was not judged. No one wore devices to count hours. No one measured the quality of sleep. They simply accepted it, however it came. Deep or restless, brief or long. Because tomorrow, the sun would rise again, and the work would return. The fire would be lit once more, the room would warm, and the day would begin again. So, sleep was sacred, not in grandeur, but in necessity. It was the pause, the breath, the quiet gift that arrived at day's end, asking for nothing except stillness.
In the homes of the wealthy, especially in medieval and Renaissance Europe, sleep often came with ceremony and structure. A large, canopied bed stood at the center of the room, its heavy curtains drawn shut to keep in warmth and privacy. These beds were not just for sleeping, they were symbols of status. Decorated with embroidery, carved wood, and expensive fabrics, they served as a visual statement of the household's wealth. But sleeping in such grandeur didn't always mean comfort. Mattresses, even for the rich, could be lumpy and uneven, filled with straw or feathers that shifted over time. Sheets were coarse by modern standards, and washing them was a rare event. Pillows might be embroidered, but they were often stiff, and blankets heavy with woven wool. Sleep, too, was different for the wealthy. Their hours were dictated less by the sun and more by leisure. They might stay awake longer into the evening, lit by candlelight, passing time with music or conversation, then retire late and rise at their own pace. Unlike laborers, they did not always follow the sun's rhythms. Even so, interruptions were common. Servants might enter to stoke the fire or deliver news. Bells rang for early mass. In castles and manors, the stone walls echoed with the movement of others, the clatter of feet in long corridors. Sleep was rarely silent. And despite the riches, fears lingered. Nightmares were seen as omens. Strange dreams could mean spiritual unrest. People prayed before sleep, hoping to ward off bad visions. Dream interpretation became a quiet obsession among those with time to ponder them. Meanwhile, in colder climates, sleeping in warmth was a nightly challenge. Beds had no central heating, so bed warmers, metal pans filled with hot coals, were used to warm the sheets before sleep. The risk, however, was ever present. Coals too hot could scorch the bed or worse. Some households avoided them altogether, choosing thick furs and layers of quilts instead. For the children of noble families, sleep often came in nurseries, watched over by nannies. Their routines were gentler, their beds smaller, but no more comfortable. Cradles and small cots were lined with the same coarse cloth, though often painted or adorned for display. In wealthier homes, even sleep took on the appearance of ritual. There were prayers, formal disrobing, and the soft hush of footsteps across wooden floors as candles were snuffed one by one. Yet for all its elegance, night was never free of its uncertainties. And so, even in soft sheets beneath embroidered covers, sleep came with a kind of tension. Dreams danced just beyond the curtain. Shadows flickered on stone walls. The night held both comfort and caution, and in the stillness of the chamber, surrounded by all the signs of privilege, one might lie awake, listening for the creak of the door or the whisper of wind down the chimney. And while the wealthier classes had the luxury of beds to themselves, sleep was still often shared. Husbands and wives, of course, but also siblings, servants, or guests. In many noble households, there were not enough rooms for every visitor, so sharing a bed was not unusual, even among those who were not close. This was not always for affection, but for warmth, and simply because there was nowhere else to go. Some chambers had trundle beds tucked beneath the main one. Servants would sleep there, ready to rise at a moment's notice. Others laid blankets by the hearth. Firelight, dim and flickering, was often the last thing people saw before closing their eyes. Curtains around the bed served another purpose as well. They helped block out pests. With open windows and thatched roofs, insects found their way in, even in fine homes. Rats and mice, too, were a constant concern. The canopy helped, but not always enough. It's easy to imagine these grand chambers as peaceful and silent, but in truth, they were alive with sounds. A draft through the stone walls, the far-off hoot of an owl, dogs stirring below, the groan of the wooden beams above. Sleep came slowly and not always deeply. When illness struck, sleep became even more fragile. Fever dreams, chills, and coughing disturbed the nights. Without modern medicine, people relied on herbs, prayers, and rest. Physicians recommended sleeping on one side to improve digestion or to prevent nightmares, but few could rest easily when pain was present. For women, sleep was often lighter still. Mothers listened for their children. Wet nurses stirred to tend to infants. The weight of duty lingered into the night. And yet sleep was precious, a short escape from the pressures of station, of etiquette, and of watching eyes. As time moved on into the 16th and 17th centuries, people's understanding of sleep began to shift. Sleep manuals and advice columns began to appear, early guides to proper rest. Some advised against sleeping too long. Others warned that too much dreaming could make the mind soft. Clean sheets, cool air, and moderate food before bed were often recommended by scholars and clergy alike. And yet, the fundamental experience remained unchanged. The wealthy, despite their luxuries, still closed their eyes with the same quiet hope as everyone else, that they would wake again, safe and well, with the morning sun. Sleep was never just sleep. It was status, superstition, routine, and refuge. And through every layer of fabric and custom, it remained a deeply human need, wrapped in silence, stirred by fear, warmed by habit, and shared across centuries by those who, each night, simply longed to drift away. Far from the bustling manor houses and warm hearths of family homes, sleep took on a very different shape inside the stone walls of monasteries. For monks and nuns, sleep was not a matter of comfort or personal preference. It was a spiritual discipline. In the cold, dim chambers of monastic buildings, silence reigned. The air was still, echoing only with distant footsteps or the creak of ancient wood. Time passed not with the rising and setting sun alone, but with the tolling of bells, summoning the faithful to prayer, to work, and to sleep.
Monastic life followed a strict rhythm. It was built around what was known as the divine office, a schedule of prayers offered throughout the day and night. One of these came long after dusk, known as matins, and it often began in the middle of the night, sometimes around 2 or 3 in the morning. Because of this, monks and nuns rarely slept a full night through. Their sleep was broken into segments. After a brief rest following nightfall, they would rise quietly, gather in the chapel, and chant in candlelit shadows. The prayers were slow and steady, their voices rising together like a gentle stream flowing through darkness. Afterward, they might return to their beds for a few more hours before the next call to duty. Their sleeping quarters were called dormitories, a word that would later echo through schools and barracks. In these large, shared rooms, rows of simple wooden beds stretched in quiet uniformity. No pillows, no thick blankets, just a straw mattress, a coarse blanket, and the chill of stone around them. Privacy was not part of the design. Sleep was not seen as a personal indulgence, but as a necessary pause before more prayer. Talking was discouraged, even when preparing for bed. Some monasteries instructed their members to sleep fully clothed, to remind them of humility and readiness. Others allowed simple night garments, but nothing luxurious. The idea was simple: to sleep without temptation, without excess, and without distraction. Even dreams were regarded with caution. Too vivid a dream might be considered a sign of spiritual trouble, a weakness of the mind. Night was not a time for wandering thoughts, but for rest and readiness. And yet, in this austere setting, there was a kind of peace, the absence of clutter, the quiet rhythm of shared life, the knowledge that each moment, even those spent sleeping, was part of something larger, a devotion that stretched beyond the self. Monks and nuns learned to sleep lightly. They trained their bodies to rise at the sound of the bell, no matter how deep the hour. Over time, this broken pattern of rest became natural. They came to accept sleep not as an escape, but as a brief stillness between acts of worship. In winter, the cold was sharp. Fires were not often lit in the dormitories. Breath hung in the air. Hands and feet stiffened beneath thin coverings. Still, they endured it all in silence, believing that discomfort brought them closer to spiritual purity. There were exceptions, of course. Illness or age sometimes allowed for longer rest, but the ideal remained firm. Sleep was not for pleasure, it was for renewal. Enough to continue, enough to pray again. Some monasteries followed even older patterns of rest, dividing sleep into 2 distinct periods. After nightfall, the first sleep might last until matins. Then, after prayers, a second sleep would follow, continuing until dawn. In this quiet gap between sleep sessions, monks might meditate, write, or reflect, wrapped in robes, seated on wooden benches, warmed only by habit and faith. And although they lived in strict simplicity, their sleep was not without grace. The gentle routine, the absence of noise, the lack of worry about the next day, all of this offered a strange kind of freedom. The mind quieted more easily. There was no rush, no light from lamps or clocks or voices, only stillness, only the deep, slow rhythm of lives devoted to order. As the centuries passed, monastic habits began to influence the world beyond the cloister. The notion of early to bed, early to rise had roots here. The idea of sleeping in 2 phases, too, found its way into the broader society. Even the architecture of shared sleeping spaces would echo in places like hospitals, boarding schools, and military camps. But for those who lived behind the monastery walls, sleep remained sacred in its own quiet way. Not a luxury, not a retreat, just a pause, a breath, a slow sinking into the dark until the bell tolled again, calling them back into the waking world.
Beyond the stone cloisters and noble chambers, most people lived simple lives in small villages, where sleep was a matter of necessity rather than custom. These were the homes of farmers, tradespeople, shepherds, and weavers, people whose days began with the first light and ended when the fire burned low. Their houses were modest, usually just 1 or 2 rooms, shared by the entire family. There was no privacy, no personal space. Sleep, like everything else, was shared. Parents, children, and sometimes even grandparents might sleep in the same room. In some places, even animals were brought indoors at night for warmth and safety. Goats, chickens, the occasional pig, all part of the household's quiet, breathing rhythm. Beds, if they existed, were homemade, built from local wood and stuffed with straw. Some families had only one bed, reserved for the adults or the elderly. Others slept on benches or mats on the floor, wrapped in cloaks or coarse wool blankets. A good night's sleep was a gift, not always guaranteed, and often disturbed by cold, hunger, or noise. The hearth was the heart of the home, and at night it gave off the last flickers of warmth. Families would gather close around it before sleep, sharing quiet stories, passing down folk songs, or simply sitting in silence. Then, slowly as the embers faded, they would lie down, wherever space allowed, and close their eyes. Sleep in the village followed the natural rhythm of the world. There were no clocks, no alarms. People rose with the dawn, not by choice, but by the demands of the land. The rooster's call, the first light through the cracks in the wall, the lowing of cattle in the yard, these were the sounds that gently pulled them from rest. But their nights were not without pattern. Like others in earlier centuries, many villagers slept in 2 phases. The first sleep might begin shortly after sunset, once supper was finished and darkness settled. This would last for several hours, until midnight or just beyond. Then, a period of wakefulness, sometimes brief, sometimes longer. This middle night interval was quiet and unhurried. People might stir the fire, drink water, tend to a baby, or speak softly with a partner. In some communities, it was even common to visit neighbors or check on the animals during this time, not as a disruption, but as a natural pause. Afterward, the second sleep began, stretching into the early morning. This division of rest was not seen as strange. It was simply how bodies behaved in darkness, especially in a world without artificial light. When the sun set, people grew sleepy. When it was gone long enough, they awoke. And when their minds settled again, they returned to bed. Village sleep was practical. People often wore their day clothes to bed, especially in winter. Nightgowns, when they existed, were simple and handed down across generations. Children curled up beside parents. Infants were swaddled tightly and rocked by the flickering light of the fire. No one expected perfect stillness or silence. Sometimes sleep came interrupted by storms, by howling dogs, by the wind whistling through wooden shutters. The roof might leak, the cold might creep in through the cracks, but these things were accepted, part of the fabric of nightly life. People knew sleep would return eventually. Dreams, too, played a quiet role. In these villages, dreams were shared in the morning, over bread or porridge. A strange dream might be a sign of good luck, of coming trouble, or of nothing at all. Old women sometimes knew how to read them, or at least how to comfort those troubled by them. Nightmares were chased away with whispered prayers or small charms hung above the door. Children were taught to respect the dark, but not fear it. Shadows on the wall were explained as tricks of the fire. The creaks in the roof were just old wood settling. And if something truly frightened them, a parent's hand was nearby, ready to pull them close. And so, in these quiet cottages, Sleep came without formality. There were no rituals, no schedules written on walls, just habit, repetition, and the soft pull of fatigue. The land worked them hard, and their bodies knew when to rest. As the fire died down and the last voice fell silent, the house settled into its nighttime hum. The soft breathing of sleepers, the occasional sigh, the rustle of blankets as someone turned over. These were the lullabies of ordinary life. Sleep in the village was neither elegant nor ideal, but it was enough. Enough to restore aching muscles, enough to prepare for another day, enough to keep going, one night after another, in the steady rhythm of life lived close to the earth.
As villages gave way to towns and towns expanded into cities, the way people slept began to shift. In the growing urban centers of medieval and early modern Europe, sleep was shaped not only by the cycle of the sun, but also by noise, crowds, and the bustle of daily commerce. Homes were smaller, streets were narrower, walls were thinner. In many cities, families lived stacked on top of one another, on narrow plots divided by wood or stone, each floor holding another generation or another trade. Privacy was rare, and sleep, when it came, was often shared with more than just family. City nights were never truly silent. Horses clopped along cobblestones, dogs barked in distant alleys, church bells rang the hours, even through the dark. The chatter of late-night drinkers or the cries of vendors cleaning up their stalls could carry into upper windows long after sunset. For the poor, sleep came in crowded tenements, with beds shared by siblings, cousins, or neighbors. In some homes, families took turns sleeping, one person resting while another worked. Space was limited and comfort was minimal. A sack of straw, a rough blanket, the warmth of a nearby body, whether welcomed or not. Light, or the lack of it, shaped the sleep of city dwellers. Candles were expensive. Oil lamps required fuel. Most relied on the fading light of day and the glow of the hearth. Once darkness fell, the world shrank to the reach of a single flame, and so many went to bed early, not out of weariness, but because there was little else to do. But for others, especially tradesmen, bakers, or night watchmen, nighttime was their working hour. Bakers rose before dawn to prepare bread for the morning crowd. Watchmen patrolled the streets, calling out the time, announcing fires or warning of thieves. Their voices echoed through alleys, marking the passage of the night. Some parts of the city never truly slept. Inns, taverns, and brothels remained open through the dark, welcoming travelers, merchants, and those avoiding home. For these souls, sleep came late, if at all, and when it did arrive, it was often restless, taken in unfamiliar beds, with one's money tied close and one eye open. In wealthier neighborhoods, households followed stricter routines. Servants with light candles draw heavy drapes and prepare the bedchambers before their masters retired. Yet even in these quieter districts, the city's pulse could still be heard, soft and distant, but always present. A carriage wheel, a child's cry, a door creaking open nearby. People in cities learned to sleep through interruption. They grew accustomed to the hum of human life around them. Some found comfort in the familiarity of it, the way voices carried, the rhythm of horses, the scent of baking bread wafting up through wooden floors. And though the setting was different, many urban dwellers still followed the older pattern of segmented sleep. After the first sleep, some would rise to write letters, tend to small chores, or share quiet talk by the fire. The night, broken in two, offered a pause, a space for thought, reflection, or simply rest between rests. Dreams remained a topic of curiosity. In cities, more people had access to books, pamphlets, and preachers who warned about the dangers of temptation, even in sleep. Some believed dreams could be messages from God. Others saw them as tricks of the devil. Dream manuals were sold at markets, promising insight into the symbols seen during slumber: falling, flying, losing teeth, seeing fire. Doctors, too, began offering advice for better rest. Avoid cheese before bed, some wrote. Keep your feet warm. Do not sleep with your mouth open. Herbal remedies became popular: lavender for calm, valerian for deep rest, and chamomile to ease the mind. Sleep, once seen as simply a need, was slowly becoming a subject of study and concern. Children in the city faced their own sleep struggles. Crying infants, cramped cradles, and the ever-present noise made rest a challenge. Mothers soothed their children with lullabies, soft humming, and simple prayers whispered in the dark. And as they drifted off, the world outside kept moving, kept stirring. Sleep in the city was different from sleep in the countryside. It was busier, closer, louder, but still it remained necessary. At the end of long days filled with walking, trading, hauling, or stitching, the body still yearned for stillness. And despite the sounds and the closeness, many found comfort in knowing others were near, that behind every wall, someone else was lying down, closing their eyes, and letting go of the day. Even in cities filled with firelight and footsteps, sleep found its way in, through shutters and over rooftops, into narrow rooms and shared spaces. Quietly, patiently, it wrapped itself around the weary and carried them gently through the night.
Throughout history, people's sleep was deeply shaped by the rhythms of the seasons. In a world without electricity, time felt different. Daylight came and went according to nature's pace, and night expanded or shrank depending on the month. People adjusted, not by changing the world around them, but by changing themselves. In summer, sleep came late and ended early. The sun lingered in the sky, casting long golden rays well into the evening. Children played longer. Work in the fields stretched into the cooler twilight hours. People sat outside their homes, talking softly, watching the last light fade. Sleep was often delayed, not by clocks, but by the feeling that the day still had more to give. Inside, rooms stayed warm even after nightfall. Windows, if there were any, might be left open to let in a faint breeze. Thin linens replaced woolen blankets. Some slept atop the covers entirely, hoping to escape the clinging heat. Sleep was lighter in summer, easily broken by the buzz of insects, the stir of warm air, or the sounds of others still awake. Farmers rose early to beat the heat. Sleep, if missed during the night, might be made up with a short nap after lunch. In some places, this midday rest became a custom, the siesta, offering shade, silence, and a break from the sun's intensity. Though the night was shorter, the day allowed pockets of stillness. In winter, everything changed. The days were brief, the nights long and quiet. Darkness arrived early, sometimes before the evening meal. The world outside grew hushed, blanketed by snow or swept by bitter winds. Families gathered close around fires, telling stories, sewing, mending tools, or simply sitting in silence. Once supper was done and the flames dimmed, people often went to bed. It might only be 7 or 8 in the evening, but with no light and little to do, there was no reason to stay awake. Heavy quilts, thick blankets, and layers of clothing made the beds feel like cocoons. People huddled together, sharing body warmth, breathing in unison. Because the night stretched for so long, winter sleep often returned to the old pattern of 2 phases: a first sleep, followed by a wakeful period, then a second sleep. During the quiet gap, some might pray, stir the fire, check on livestock, or simply rest in thought. Others used the time to dream more vividly, lulled by the deep cold and stillness outside. The cold shaped more than just the timing of sleep. In harsh winters, frost crept onto windows and across floorboards. People wore caps to bed. Some even wrapped their feet in cloth soaked in vinegar or wine, believing it would keep illness away. Heated stones or bricks were placed at the foot of the bed, wrapped in cloth to hold warmth. And still, mornings were slow to come. Autumn and spring were seasons of change, and sleep shifted with them. In the fall, as the days grew shorter and the harvest finished, people prepared for long nights. Sleep became a welcome reward after months of labor. In spring, the world awoke again, and with it came earlier mornings, birdsong at the window, and fresh air seeping into sleeping spaces. Sleep, for most of history, moved gently with the earth. People did not fight the seasons. They didn't try to light up the night or silence the morning. They adapted, patiently. They accepted darkness as part of life and found ways to rest within it. In polar regions, where daylight could vanish for months or flood the sky endlessly, sleep became even more flexible. During long winters, people settled into rhythms of rest that defied the clock, sleeping whenever their bodies asked, eating at odd hours, living in the soft quiet of extended night. In endless summer, they created rituals to draw curtains, dim lamps, and coax themselves into slumber, even as the sun refused to leave. What modern life often forgets is how deeply our ancestors were connected to natural time. They rose when the light returned. They rested when it faded. Their sleep was not squeezed into hours between schedules. It flowed, expanded, and contracted like breath. And though their beds were harder, and the air colder, and the nights darker, there was a kind of calm in letting the seasons decide. No alarms, no glowing screens, just the steady cycle of light and dark, warmth and cold, summer and winter, a rhythm older than memory, trusted by generation after generation. As the fire burned low and the night deepened, there was no rush, no pressure to fall asleep quickly. People lay still, listening to the wind against the walls, the crackle of the last ember, the soft breathing of others nearby. Sleep came as gently as snowfall, slow, quiet, and complete.
Throughout most of history, sleep was rarely a private experience. Long before modern bedrooms and personal mattresses, most people shared their sleeping space, with family, with friends, sometimes even with strangers. It wasn't unusual, it was simply how things were. In small cottages and city apartments, space was limited. Often there was only one bed, or sometimes no bed at all. A raised platform, a pile of straw, or a blanket on the floor had to serve. And because warmth was precious and fear of the night was real, people slept close. Not just for comfort, but for survival. Parents slept beside children. Siblings lay shoulder to shoulder. Grandparents, cousins, even neighbors traveling through, everyone found room where they could. Bodies arranged like puzzle pieces. Feet toward the fire in winter, heads near the open window in summer. Whispers softened into breathing, and eventually, sleep arrived. Beds, when they were available, were often large and firm, made of ropes stretched across a wooden frame or filled with hay, wool, or feathers. They sagged in the middle, they creaked, but they served their purpose. If the bed was too small, someone might sleep at the foot, curled up like a cat. Others would take turns through the night, one rising early while another slipped in. For travelers and guests, shared beds were expected. In inns and taverns, strangers might be assigned the same bed if space was tight. It wasn't considered improper, just practical. Men slept beside men, women beside women. They faced opposite directions or created barriers of cloth or blankets if needed. But more often than not, they simply lay down, spoke a few polite words, and closed their eyes. In wealthier homes, bed sharing still occurred, though with more ceremony. A servant might sleep at the foot of the master's bed to be ready at a moment's notice. A wet nurse might share a bed with an infant while the mother slept nearby. Even royalty, from time to time, shared sleeping spaces when visiting others or during times of crisis. Children almost always slept with others. Babies in cradles beside the bed, toddlers curled against their mothers. Older children often shared beds with siblings until they were well into adolescence. The idea of a child having their own room would not become common until centuries later, and only in the homes of the wealthy. Sharing a bed meant sharing stories too. Bedtime was not just for sleep, it was a time to talk, to whisper, to pass down tales, folk stories, prayers, family memories. In those quiet moments before dreams, voices carried across the blankets. A child might fall asleep listening to the rhythm of their father's breathing, or the soft murmur of a lullaby. There were rules, of course. Certain behaviors were expected. One did not fidget too much. One respected the space of others. A quick elbow might serve as a reminder if someone snored too loudly or hogged the covers. Over time, people learned to sleep still, to listen for others, and to adjust themselves quietly in the dark. And yet, despite the closeness, sleep remained personal. Each person entered their own private world once their eyes closed. The nearness of others didn't erase dreams, it only made the waking world a little less lonely. In times of illness, bed sharing became both a comfort and a risk. When one member of the family became sick, others often stayed close to provide warmth or care, but they also risked catching the same fever. During outbreaks of disease, this closeness made households vulnerable. Still, few could afford the space to separate. In colder regions, the benefits of shared sleeping were undeniable. One body might only provide so much heat, but two or three created a small island of warmth beneath thick quilts and woolen weirs. Fireplaces burned low in the night, the cold crept in through cracks in the walls, but beneath the covers, the shared breath and body heat made sleep possible. Some communities had customs around how people lay down together. In Scandinavia, sleeping benches lined the walls. In parts of Asia, mats were spread across the floor. In many places, elders took the warmest spot. Younger members curled up along the edges, and when morning came, everyone rose together, stretching limbs and shaking off the night as one. As the world modernized, private sleeping became more desirable. New ideas about health, morality, and personal space led to changes in how people viewed the night. Separate bedrooms appeared. Personal beds became signs of comfort and status. The idea of needing space to sleep began to take hold. But in many parts of the world, and for most of history, sleeping was communal, a shared necessity, a reminder that people were never truly alone, that in the quiet hours, bodies found warmth, not just in blankets, but in the nearness of others. Today, as we draw thick curtains and lie in solitude, it can be easy to forget how sleep once sounded. Shared breath, soft murmurs, the creak of straw as someone turned. A world not of silence, but of closeness. A time when falling asleep meant becoming part of something larger than oneself. And perhaps in that closeness, there was a kind of peace, a reminder that no matter how dark the night became, we were never far from the sound of another heart nearby, steady and calm, guiding us gently into sleep. When we think of sleep today, we often imagine a bed, soft, inviting, built for comfort. But for most of history, beds were far from luxurious. They were tools, not indulgences. Their design, materials, and meaning changed slowly over the centuries, evolving along with people's ideas about rest, health, and home. In early times, many people slept directly on the ground. A pile of straw or dried leaves might be spread over packed earth or wooden planks. These makeshift mattresses were gathered fresh when needed, replaced when they became too dirty or flat. There were no sheets, no pillows, only the basics needed to stay off the cold floor. Over time, straw was replaced by wool or feathers when people could afford them. Stuffed sacks, known as ticks, became common. These large fabric bags were filled with whatever was available: straw, rags, reeds, or even moss.
In wealthier homes, the tick might be filled with goose down or horsehair, offering more softness and insulation. Bed frames began to appear more regularly during the Middle Ages, especially among the better off. Wooden frames held the mattress above the floor, protecting against dampness, insects, and drafts. Ropes or leather straps were stretched across the frame to support the mattress. These ropes needed to be tightened often, giving rise to the phrase, "sleep tight." Pillows were a luxury. For much of history, only the wealthy used them regularly. The poor might roll up spare clothes or use a folded cloak beneath their head. Even blankets were precious, woven thick from wool, passed down across generations, patched and mended year after year. In some households, there was only one blanket for the entire family. Canopy beds with curtains hanging down emerged not just for elegance, but for warmth and privacy. In large homes where servants came and went, the curtains gave sleepers a sense of separation, even safety. Heavy drapes trapped heat inside during cold months, creating a small enclosed cocoon within larger drafty rooms. In royal courts and noble homes, beds became grand, ornately carved, raised high, and layered with fine fabrics. But even then, comfort was not always guaranteed. Mattresses sagged, bugs were common, the grandeur was more about status than rest. Visitors were often shown the master's bed as a sign of wealth, even if it wasn't where they slept every night. Meanwhile, in smaller homes and rural villages, sleeping arrangements remained simple. A wooden platform, a thick quilt, a cushion stuffed with straw. Children might sleep on benches or in drawers built into the wall. In colder climates, people sometimes slept in box beds, small wooden enclosures built into the room, with sliding doors or curtains. These little sleeping nooks helped hold in warmth and gave a sense of privacy in one-room homes. The idea of a personal bed developed slowly. For centuries, beds were communal, shared by couples, families, or groups. As homes grew larger and more private, the bed began to shift from a shared space to an individual one. This was especially true in cities, where rising middle classes sought to imitate the privacy and comfort of wealthier homes. By the 17th and 18th centuries, specialized bed making began to appear. Artisans crafted bed frames, upholsterers stuffed mattresses with precision. Linens were tailored. The bed was no longer just for sleeping, it became a centerpiece of the bedroom, a mark of taste and style. In some cultures, beds were reserved for the elderly or honored guests. Younger family members slept on mats or blankets rolled out at night and put away in the morning. This daily rhythm of setting up and storing beds shaped the flow of household life, especially in homes with limited space. Not all cultures viewed raised beds as ideal. In parts of Asia, sleeping close to the floor was the tradition and remains common today. Mats made of straw, reed, or cotton were unrolled each night, simple and practical. These arrangements kept homes uncluttered and clean, and they followed the rhythms of light, temperature, and movement. As the industrial era arrived, mass production changed everything. Mattresses became more uniform, metal springs were introduced, sleeping surfaces grew softer, more supportive. Bedding became affordable for more families. The bed was no longer a sign of class, it was a standard part of the home. Today we take much of that for granted. Pillows are expected, sheets come in sets, memory foam and adjustable bases promise perfect rest. But behind all of that is a long story of people trying to stay warm, stay dry, and find peace in the dark. The evolution of the bed reflects the evolution of sleep itself. From shared piles of straw to private memory foam, each generation has made small changes, chasing the same goal: rest, not just for the body, but for the soul. A place to let go of the day, to drift gently into dreams. And still, no matter how elaborate the structure, it's the silence, the stillness, and the slowing of breath that matter most. Whether on a soft mattress or a wooden bench, sleep comes when we allow it, and it always has. While people across the centuries often viewed sleep as a necessity, dreams were something different, something mysterious. Sleep came every night, but dreams arrived with unpredictability. They stirred wonder, fear, and fascination. And for much of history, People believed dreams carried messages, signs, or glimpses of another world. In ancient civilizations, dreams were often seen as sacred. The Egyptians believed dreams were visits from the gods or the dead. A dream could foretell the future or reveal truths hidden in waking life. Pharaohs kept dream interpreters in their courts, priests trained to read the symbols and meanings behind each nighttime vision. Temples were even built where people could sleep in hopes of receiving divine messages. The Greeks, too, paid attention to dreams. The philosopher Aristotle wrote that dreams reflected the state of the body and the mind, but others, like the healer Hippocrates, saw dreams as clues to illness. A person dreaming of fire might be feverish. One dreaming of water might be suffering from imbalance. The mind, it seemed, tried to speak through images when words no longer worked. In Rome, dream books were common. These were collections of symbols and their meanings. An eagle might represent victory. A river might point to change. A falling tooth might warn of death in the family. While not everyone believed these guides, many turned to them for reassurance or for explanation when a dream lingered too long in memory. Religions also shaped how people viewed dreams. In Christianity, dreams were both feared and revered. Some were thought to come from God, visions given to saints or prophets. Others were suspected to be tricks of the devil, and so dreams were often recorded, prayed over, or shared with spiritual advisors. The nighttime, after all, was a space where the soul might wander, and not always to safe places. In Islam, dreams have long held a respected place. The Prophet Muhammad's dreams were considered divine revelations. To this day, many Muslims reflect carefully on their dreams, seeking signs, warnings, or comfort from beyond. There is a belief that the soul leaves the body during sleep, traveling far, and returns before waking. This journey, unseen but felt, adds depth to the act of resting. In East Asian traditions, dreams were tied closely to nature and energy. In Chinese philosophy, dreams might be the result of internal imbalances. Too much heat, too little air, blocked energy. The body and mind were one, and what disturbed one could stir visions in the other. Herbs, diets, and meditations were used not just to heal the body, but to calm the dreams. Among indigenous cultures around the world, dreams were respected as part of the spirit's voice. The Ojibwe people of North America created dream catchers, woven hoops hung above sleeping places meant to trap bad dreams and let good ones pass through. Elders listened to children's dreams with care, teaching them to notice patterns, animals, or feelings that might hold wisdom. But even outside of spiritual meaning, dreams were often simply shared. Families might begin their day by talking about what they saw in the night. A strange image, a happy reunion, a moment of fear or flight. These dreams became part of daily life, stitched into breakfast conversations or whispered during chores. Not all dreams were welcomed, though. Nightmares were deeply feared, especially in times when people believed the night held real danger. A bad dream might mean a curse, an omen, or a restless spirit nearby. In medieval Europe, people spoke of a creature called the nightmare, a dark force that sat on the chest of sleepers, choking their breath and filling their minds with terror. The word nightmare still carries that shadow today. Children were often taught ways to avoid nightmares. Sleep on your right side. Don't eat too late. Say a prayer before closing your eyes. Place iron beneath the bed. Hang herbs at the door. Whatever worked to keep the night safe. As time went on and science began to study sleep, dreams were still a mystery. Theories changed. Some thought dreams were the brain's way of cleaning up the day, sorting thoughts, tossing out what wasn't needed.
Others believe dreams helped us process emotions, fears, and hopes. Freud, the famous psychoanalyst, saw dreams as windows into the unconscious, a place where desires and memories played out in secret. But even as explanations grew more clinical, the feeling of a dream remained unchanged. That moment of drifting into a world not quite real, not quite false. A room that looked like home but wasn't. A voice you knew but couldn't name. A flight without wings. A fall without fear. Dreams, in their strangeness, kept part of the mystery of sleep alive. And through the centuries, one thing stayed constant. People remembered their dreams when they mattered. A message from a lost loved one, a warning that seemed to come true, a peaceful scene that lingered through the day like a soft song. Even today, people wake and sit quietly, wondering what a dream meant. Was it just a collection of thoughts? Or something more? A memory from long ago? A hope not yet spoken? In the stillness of night, when all the world seems hushed, the mind drifts into its own landscapes. Some clear, some strange, some forgotten by morning, some never forgotten. And as we lie down, close our eyes, and breathe deeper, the curtain between waking and dreaming grows thin. Another world waits there, familiar and distant, soft and shifting, a space where anything is possible, where the night tells stories and the soul listens. For many people today, sleep comes with silence. We shut the door, draw the curtains, turn off the lights, and seek stillness. But for most of history, the night was never truly quiet. Instead, people slept through a world of sounds, some familiar, some strange, and some deeply comforting. In the countryside, night brought its own rhythm. Crickets chirped in steady patterns, owls called out across fields, wind moved gently through leaves or howled against the roof. These natural sounds marked the passing of time. People knew by instinct what hour it was by the noises outside. Animals added their own voices. Dogs barked in the distance. Cows stirred in their stalls. Roosters sometimes crowed too early. Horses snorted or shifted in their sleep. And in the corners of the house, mice scratched softly in the walls. All of these sounds were accepted, not as interruptions, but as part of life. Inside the home, there were even more noises. Wooden beams creaked as they settled into the cool of the night. The fire, if still burning, popped or hissed. Beds groaned under shifting bodies. Someone might snore. Someone else might sigh. The house was alive, breathing in its own quiet way. In colder months, the sound of the fire was often the last thing heard before sleep. The slow crackle of burning logs, the occasional snap of embers, the whisper of heat moving through a stone chimney. It was a comfort, a reminder that warmth remained even as darkness pressed close. Some homes had clocks that chimed through the night, each hour marked by a soft bell, a wooden knock, or the rustle of a weight-driven mechanism. These sounds became part of the background, so familiar they hardly woke anyone up. In fact, they often reassured sleepers, reminding them that time was moving gently forward. In cities, night was even noisier. People lived close together. Walls were thin, streets echoed with footsteps, carts, the clatter of hooves, or the call of late travelers. In some places, watchmen walked through neighborhoods, calling out the time or warnings like, "All is well." These voices, drifting through shuttered windows, became part of the night's fabric. Markets and taverns might stay open late. Music, laughter, or arguments carried into nearby rooms. For those who lived above their work, bakers, cobblers, merchants, the noise of cleaning, sorting, and quiet preparation
continued long after dark. Sleep came gradually, with the world still humming beyond the door. Night sounds weren't always welcome. Thunderstorms could frighten both children and adults. A knock at the door after sundown stirred unease. The howl of wolves or the cry of an unknown animal in the woods might wake the entire household. But these moments were rare and often followed by deeper rest once they passed. Many people, especially children, found comfort in familiar noises. A lullaby sung softly, the rustle of a blanket, the murmur of parents speaking in the next room. These small, steady sounds helped the mind relax. They meant someone was near, that all was well. In some homes, people made their own sleep sounds, deliberate and gentle. Humming, prayers whispered over and over, a soft song repeated until drowsiness came. These rhythms helped calm the body, creating a bridge from wakefulness to dreams. Silence, when it did come, was profound. On clear winter nights, after the fire had faded and the wind had stilled, the quiet could feel heavy, complete, so deep it seemed to press against the ears. Some welcomed it, others found it unsettling. In that stillness, every breath seemed louder, every shift of the blanket echoed. In monasteries and abbeys, the night followed strict rhythms. Bells marked the hours of prayer even in the dark. Monks would rise in the early hours to chant, and then return to their beds before dawn. The sounds of sleep and devotion blended, shaping a different kind of rest, one woven with purpose and discipline. Seafarers knew an entirely different night. On ships, the sounds never stopped. The groan of wood, the slap of water against the hull, the creak of ropes, the call of sailors on watch. Sleep came in shifts, rocked by the sea, wrapped in the music of motion. For many, these noises became the very lullaby that carried them into slumber. In some cultures, special instruments were used to guide people into sleep. Wooden wind chimes gently struck, rain sticks filled with seeds, drums played in slow, steady rhythms. These sounds were not loud, but they created a pattern, a texture that helps settle the body and mind. Even today, many people seek out such sounds. White noise machines, recordings of rainfall, ocean waves, or crackling fires. These are echoes of older nights when the world did not go silent, but instead whispered its way through sleep. And so, though the world has changed, the connection between sound and sleep remains. A soft rhythm, a steady presence, something for the mind to follow, like footsteps in the dark. Sleep is not always about silence. Sometimes it's about surrendering to a gentle world of sound, letting the rustle of leaves, the sigh of the wind, or the slow breath of someone nearby guide us inward, into rest, into peace, into the quiet music of the night.
Sleep was not something people simply fell into. For much of history, going to bed was a process, a series of quiet actions and gentle routines that signaled the body and the mind that night had come. These rituals varied by place, by time, and by household, but they all served one purpose: to ease the transition from wakefulness into rest. In homes lit only by fire or candlelight, evening began early. As the sun lowered, shadows stretched across the walls. Tasks that required strong light were put away. Threads were tied off, tools were set aside. Children were gathered in. Meals were finished while there was still a glow outside. And then the household began its slow winding down. Fires were banked. Ashes stirred and coals pushed gently into place so they might last through the night. Water was fetched, sometimes from a well or stream, so no one would have to venture out in the dark. Doors were barred, shutters closed, and animals checked one final time. Clothes were changed, if there were other garments to wear. Often people simply loosened belts or untied laces. Nightshirts became more common in later centuries, long and plain, shared among family members. Those without extra clothing simply slept in what they had worn during the day, perhaps only removing shoes or outer layers. Feet were washed, especially in rural places where bare walking was common. The dirt of the day was gently rinsed away using basins kept near the door or hearth. In some homes, elders were helped with this task, their tired feet dried with soft cloths as a sign of care. Prayers were whispered, not just as a show of faith, but as a comfort. In many households, simple words were repeated each night, a line for protection, a phrase of thanks, a request for peaceful dreams. Even those who no longer believed often kept the habit, finding calm in the familiar rhythm of words passed down across generations. Bedtime was also a time for talk. In families, the youngest asked quiet questions about the stars, the animals, the day ahead. Elders might share a memory or a proverb. Couples exchanged stories of the day's work or plans for the next. In silence or speech, there was closeness. Some people read when reading was possible. A passage from scripture, a letter, a favorite poem. In places where books were rare, someone might recite from memory. These words, spoken gently, help smooth the edges of thought. The mind, carried by steady sound, loosened its grip on the day. Herbs and natural remedies also played a part. In some homes, lavender was tucked near the bed. Chamomile tea, warm and mild, was sipped before lying down. In colder climates, warm stones were wrapped in cloth and placed beneath the covers. These small comforts brought warmth and calm to tired limbs. Mothers sang to their children, fathers hummed. Songs passed down like lullabies for the soul, melodies so old no one remembered when they first began. The sound of a voice, soft and slow, was often the last thing heard before sleep arrived. In shared homes, there were small courtesies, blowing out the candle without noise, moving gently to avoid disturbing others already asleep, folding one's garments neatly by the bedside. These small acts were part of a quiet respect, a kind of nightly kindness that helped everyone rest more easily. There were superstitions, too. Salt kept by the door, iron placed beneath the bed, a broom leaned against the wall. These small things were believed to ward off spirits, misfortune, or strange dreams. Whether believed fully or not, they became part of the evening rhythm, done without question, simply because they always had been. In wealthier homes, nighttime might involve a servant helping to turn down the bed or drawing heavy curtains closed. Slippers were placed beside the frame. A candle was lit just long enough to reach the covers, then gently blown out. The room, now silent, seemed to pause. But even in grand homes or small cottages, the act of lying down held the same meaning. It was a surrender, a soft letting go. The world outside, busy and loud, grew distant. What mattered was the warmth beneath the blanket, the breath growing slower, the stillness settling in. For those who lived alone, rituals became even more important. Lighting a single candle, folding a blanket just so, speaking aloud to no one, just to hear the comfort of a voice. These habits became anchors, steady and grounding, helping sleep arrive without fear or loneliness. And for many, the final moment before sleep was simple. A deep breath, a quiet thought, a turning of the body to one side. The same way it had been the night before, the same way it would be the night after. Not dramatic, not profound, just ordinary, just peaceful. These small, repeating acts, washing, whispering, folding, resting, formed the gentle frame around each night. They reminded people that the day was ending, and that for now, nothing more was required. The world would keep turning, the fire would cool, the stars would continue their silent watch, and the sleeper, wrapped in their own quiet rhythm,
would drift softly into the dark. Not all sleep happened indoors. For much of human history, and even long after the invention of houses and beds, people often slept outside, under trees, beside rivers, near fires, or on the open ground. Sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity, and always with the sky above them. In warmer climates, summer brought relief from the heat of enclosed rooms. The air inside could grow heavy and still. Walls trapped warmth, making it hard to rest. But outside, a breeze moved freely. The earth cooled as the sun disappeared. People brought their mats or blankets to the rooftops, to courtyards, to open terraces, and found peace beneath the stars. Sleeping outside required preparation. A flat spot, clear of stones and insects, a woven mat or folded cloth beneath the body, a blanket, sometimes dampened with water in the hottest regions, laid lightly across the legs, and always a sense of awareness, of nearby animals, of shifting weather, of sounds that came without warning. Shepherds, farmers, and travelers were especially familiar with the night sky. Those who worked the land often camped in the fields during harvest, too far to return home each evening. They built small shelters from branches or straw, or they slept near their animals, curled beside dogs or nestled against hay for warmth. The stars became familiar companions. People knew their patterns, their paths. Certain constellations marked the changing seasons. Others guided travelers by night. Lying on their backs, wrapped in silence, people looked upward and found comfort in the vastness above them. It reminded them of their place, small, quiet, steady. In dry regions, entire families sometimes moved outdoors for weeks at a time during the hottest months. Roofs became bedrooms. Shade cloths were stretched between walls. Sleep came beneath open skies, surrounded by the hum of insects, the occasional bark of a distant dog, or the rustle of trees. Even babies were carried out and laid gently beside their mothers, rocked by wind in the steady rhythm of breath. For nomadic groups, sleep was always part of the landscape. Tents were raised at dusk and lowered at dawn. The earth beneath changed often, but the act of lying down beneath the same moon offered a kind of continuity. Some nights brought stillness, others brought sandstorms or cold, but sleep came regardless, wrapped in furs or thin cotton, depending on what the land allowed. In forested regions, people sometimes slept near fires, the flames offering both warmth and protection. Stories were shared before the embers dimmed. Someone always kept watch while others rested. A rotation, a rhythm. Trust passed from hand to hand. Hunters and soldiers, too, slept outside, sometimes unwillingly, sometimes in silence, on the edge of forests, along riverbanks, or behind stone walls. Their sleep was often light, broken by shifts and duties. But even in those short hours, the body found its way to rest, guided by fatigue and the comfort of routine. In some cultures, sleeping outdoors was part of religious or spiritual practice. Pilgrims on long journeys laid down beside roads or under sacred trees. Monks seeking solitude lived in caves or open shelters, sleeping with no barrier between themselves and the world. The openness reminded them of humility, of transience, of the softness of being alive. Even in times of celebration, people might sleep beneath the sky. Weddings that lasted into the night, festivals with dancing and food. When the fire died down and the songs faded, guests rested where they could, on blankets, in courtyards, beneath tents. The laughter of the day softened into the breathing of many joined in rest. Weather was always a concern. Rain could arrive without warning, cold crept in during the early hours. So people listened to the wind, to the scent in the air, to the behavior of animals, the change in birdsong, the quiet of insects. These signs taught them when to find shelter, when to stay close to home. But when the weather was right, sleeping outdoors brought its own kind of peace. The air felt wider, dreams felt longer, and the line between the self and the world blurred gently. There were no walls to separate breath from breeze, no ceilings to block the view of the stars. In many places, children grew up with memories of these nights, of lying side by side with cousins, of listening to the crackle of a shared fire, of waking to the faintest light of dawn and the sound of birds beginning their songs. These were simple memories, but they stayed. Even today, people seek that feeling. They go camping. They lie in hammocks. They rest on porches or balconies, listening to the night unfold. The desire to sleep beneath the open sky is old, older than history. A quiet longing to return to something the body still remembers, even when the mind forgets. To sleep outside is to be reminded that rest is not always a private thing. Sometimes it belongs to the earth, the wind, the stars. That sleep can happen anywhere when the heart is still and the air is kind. And so, under a sky that has watched over countless generations, sleep returns. Soft and slow. A breath given to the night. A body at ease. A spirit wrapped not in walls or blankets, but in the wide and endless quiet of the world itself.
Long before the invention of modern medicine, people understood one thing clearly. When the body ached or the mind felt unwell, sleep was essential. Rest wasn't just a pause, it was a kind of healing. Something the body asked for, and something the body used, even when no one fully understood why. In ancient times, healers often prescribed sleep. Not potions, not complex treatments, just deep, uninterrupted rest. The sick were laid in darkened rooms, curtains drawn, noise kept away, herbs placed nearby for scents or comfort. The world outside faded as the ill were encouraged to lie still and sleep as much as they could. In temples of healing across ancient Greece, people came not only for cures, but for dreams. They were brought into quiet spaces, given time to rest, and told that healing would come while they slept. Some believed gods would whisper answers in the form of dreams. Others believed that simply lying down, in a place of calm, allowed the body to do its hidden work. Throughout history, caregivers learned to create peace around the sick. Fires were stoked gently, cloths cooled with water, broths served warm but mild, and always encouragement to sleep. Parents stroked brows, spouses held hands, friends stayed close by, saying little, because they knew that when sleep finally arrived, it was a good sign. Sleep came in waves, especially during fevers. The body dipped in and out of awareness. Time blurred. A face, a voice, a scent, all became part of the drifting. In those moments, the line between dreams and waking could dissolve completely. But often, after long hours or days, sleep brought its gift. A clearer head, a cooled brow, a steadier breath. During epidemics and times of great illness, sleep became both a refuge and a risk. Families huddled together, unsure who would wake. Some recovered, others did not. And yet sleep remained, one of the few things that could not be taken. A moment of quiet when pain lessened, a soft escape when the world outside grew too heavy. In colder seasons, illness struck more often. Chills settled into bones, coughs echoed through rooms, and people responded with what they had: extra blankets, heated bricks wrapped in cloth, warm milk before bed. Children were tucked in early, the sick stayed in bed longer than usual. Sleep, again, was the body's shield. Not all rest was easy. Pain made it hard. Fear made it harder. But caregivers learned small tricks: singing softly, rubbing hands, telling slow stories. Anything to help the sick forget their discomfort, even briefly. Anything to guide them towards sleep. Some cultures created entire spaces for healing sleep. In Japan, rooms were arranged with simplicity: soft light, clean mats, calming air. In parts of the Middle East, shaded courtyards with gentle fountains served as places where the ill could sleep beside moving water, its sound meant to soothe. Even when nothing more could be done, sleep remained a comfort. For the elderly, for the weak, for those at the edge of life, sleep was seen not as defeat, but as release.
eyes closed gently, breathing slowed, and the room settled around them in silence, holding space for what sleep might bring. Sometimes the body healed, sometimes it didn't, but always rest played its part. Children were taught early that sleep made them strong. After tears or tantrums, they were laid down and told, "Rest now. You'll feel better after." And more often than not, they did. Their bodies grew while they slept, their fevers broke, their minds quieted. Adults learned the same lesson over and over. After long days in fields or workshops, the body ached. Muscles pulled, backs stiffened, but a night's sleep changed things. The pain dulled, the body softened, energy returned. Those who studied medicine in earlier centuries didn't always have the tools we have today, but they observed what mattered, and sleep was always on the list of remedies. Let them rest. Let them sleep through the night, they said. In literature, sleep was often described as a balm, a gentle force that softened sorrow, eased suffering, or brought peace. Characters who grieved were allowed to sleep at last. Heroes who were wounded healed slowly beneath warm covers. The writers knew, as the readers did, that rest was more than a pause. It was a turning point. Even now, when we fall ill, we do much the same. We dim the lights, we sip warm tea, we lie down, turn away from the world, and wait for sleep to arrive. Doctors still say, get plenty of rest. Nurses still speak in hushed tones. Families still whisper over loved ones sleeping, hoping that healing is happening, quietly, beneath the surface. And when health returns, it often feels like waking from a long dream. The light seems softer, the breath deeper. The body, though weak, feels possible again. And in that moment, we remember what our ancestors knew so well, that sleep, even without explanation, often brings us back to ourselves.
Though we often think of sleep as something that happens only at night, many cultures have long embraced another kind of rest, the nap, a short period of sleep taken in the warmth of the afternoon or during a quiet moment of the day. Naps, in their simplicity, have always been a gentle reply to the body's quiet request, just a little pause. In early agricultural societies, life followed the sun. People rose with the light and worked while the air was cool. By midday, when the sun stood high and the shadows disappeared, work often slowed or stopped. The heat was heavy, muscles ached, eyes blinked slowly, and so many paused. Farmers rested beneath trees, shepherds laid down beside their flocks, children curled up in shaded corners. These were not long sleeps, but brief escapes, a chance to gather strength before the day resumed. In ancient Rome, the practice of the meridiatio, a midday rest, was widely accepted. Shops closed, markets grew quiet, citizens returned home for a light meal, followed by sleep. This pause divided the day into two softer halves, each easier to manage with rest in between. Across the Mediterranean, this tradition continued for centuries. In Spain, it became known as the siesta. The afternoon grew still, shutters closed to block out the sun, streets emptied. Even now, in some regions, the siesta remains a cherished custom, less common perhaps, but still remembered as something valuable and kind. In Islamic cultures, where prayer time shaped the rhythm of the day, early rising is common. As a result, naps, known as kailula, were encouraged in the early afternoon, not only for physical rest, but for mental clarity, spiritual balance, and a return to focus. It was said that the prophet himself napped, and so the habit carried both practical and sacred meaning. In Japan, a different form of daytime rest took shape. Inamuri, literally being asleep while present, was not always considered lazy or rude. Rather, it was a sign of dedication. A worker who nodded off briefly at their desk was seen as someone so committed that even their rest happened within the flow of their duty. In monastic life, naps were often woven into daily routines. Early rising for prayer and physical labor required moments of pause.
Short rests allowed monks and nuns to maintain their rhythms without exhaustion. These were not indulgent, but restorative, a way to stay steady. In households of the past, especially where many generations lived together, the mid-afternoon quiet was often honored. The elderly rested in chairs by the hearth. Young children napped after lunch. Even those who did not sleep moved more slowly. Voices softened. The whole house breathed a little more gently. Season also played a role. In hot climates, naps were more common during summer. In colder regions, they became rare in winter, when the day was short and night arrived quickly. But still, in both places, the idea remained: rest need not be reserved only for night. Naps served many purposes. They restored energy, they lifted moods, they provided a break from labor, and sometimes they offered a space for quiet thoughts to drift, like dreams, but shorter, lighter, easier to hold on to. For those who worked with their hands, carpenters, weavers, potters, a brief nap could ease strain. For those who tended animals, it brought stillness before the evening tasks began. And for those who simply listened to their bodies, naps became a way to say yes to slowness. Not all naps happened in beds. Some took place on benches, in rocking chairs, on folded arms at a table. The key was not luxury, but surrender, a willingness to stop, to breathe, to close one's eyes and drift for a moment. In many homes, nap time was marked with small rituals: a cup of tea, a window opened slightly, a light blanket pulled over the lap. These moments prepared the body and the space for rest. There was no rush, no expectation, just a soft pause. Even today, though our lives have grown faster, the need for midday rest remains. Offices, schools, and cities may not always allow it, but the body still remembers that dip in energy, that longing for quiet, that moment just after lunch when the eyes grow heavy and the world feels slow. And so, people find ways: a doze on a train, a reclined chair by the window, 10 minutes of silence behind a closed door. The nap, however small, continues to be a thread in the fabric of daily life. For older adults, naps often return as a welcome companion. After a lifetime of busy mornings and long afternoons, rest becomes something to look forward to, not as escape, but as balance. The body asks, the spirit agrees. And so, eyes close gently in the warmth of midday. In every age, in every place, naps have whispered the same thing. You've done enough for now. Just a moment, just a breath, just a little sleep to carry you through.
Today, we often think of a bed as a personal space, a place of privacy, comfort, and quiet. But for much of history, sleep was not something done alone. People shared beds not only with spouses, but with children, siblings, servants, guests, and even strangers. Space was limited, warmth was precious, and sharing a bed was simply part of life. In medieval Europe, it was common for entire families to sleep together in a single bed or on a shared mattress laid on the floor. Parents, children, and sometimes extended family members nestled side by side, covered in furs, wool blankets, or simple cloths. It was warm, efficient, and in many ways comforting. The home itself was often just one or two rooms. A fire burned in the center or along one wall. The bed, if there was one, stood in the warmest corner. At night, the family gathered there. Small children fell asleep first, then older siblings, then parents. There were no bedtimes, just the soft settling of bodies as the evening deepened. In many places, beds were shared with guests. Hospitality meant more than offering food. It meant offering your sleeping space. A visitor, weary from travel, might be invited to share the family bed or rest beside the hearth. No one thought it strange. It was expected. Generous. A kindness exchanged without question. Travelers in inns or taverns often slept beside strangers. In roadside establishments, space was limited and expensive. Travelers paid for a spot in a bed, not for privacy. 2 or 3 people might sleep beneath the same blanket, each facing their own direction. This was called hot bedding, a way to keep warm and save money.
It might feel odd now, but back then it was just how things were. Servants sometimes slept near their employers, not always out of duty, but for practical reasons. A lady's maid might rest on a pallet in the corner. A stable boy might sleep near the horses. A nursemaid slept beside an infant. These arrangements were based on care, necessity, and proximity, not privacy. Children, especially, rarely slept alone. They shared beds with siblings, cousins, or grandparents. Laughter and whispers filled the dark. Stories were told. Questions were asked. The closeness brought comfort. A child waking from a bad dream found a hand nearby. A quiet breath beside them reminded them they weren't alone. In colder climates, shared beds were essential. The body's warmth was the best insulation. People layered blankets over many sleepers and pulled close during the coldest months. A bed full of sleepers was a warm one. In some traditions, even livestock came inside during winter nights, sleeping in barns, beneath homes, or in adjacent rooms, adding their warmth to the space. Furniture reflected this closeness. Beds were wide, often without divisions. Curtains sometimes hung around them, not just for privacy, but to trap heat. In both your homes, beds became grand, but still multiple people often slept together. It wasn't unusual for 3 or 4 people to share a large bed during times of illness, travel, or celebration. In some cultures, there were rules about bed sharing. Certain relatives could sleep beside each other while others could not. Elders might have designated spots. Children were often placed in the middle, kept safe between parents or older siblings. The bed, in this way, became a space of order, shaped by family roles and relationships. Even spiritual traditions acknowledged shared beds. In monastic communities, monks slept in long halls with beds arranged side by side, silent, orderly, equal. In boarding schools, children lined up on narrow cots, often watched over by an adult seated at the end. Privacy was minimal, but routine provided a sense of safety. Of course, not every shared bed was comfortable. People snored, moved, talked in their sleep, but most accepted these things. They were part of the night, part of being close to others, and often the comfort of another's presence outweighed the disturbance. As cities grew and wealth increased, more people began to sleep alone. Bedrooms multiplied, privacy became possible, but for a long time, even the rich shared beds for warmth or safety. Queen Elizabeth I, despite her power, often had ladies-in-waiting sleep nearby. Kings traveled with entire sleeping entourages. No one truly slept alone. Even now, traces of this old closeness remain. Couples share beds, parents nap with children, friends fall asleep beside each other during long conversations. And in moments of illness or sorrow, people still reach for another's hand in the dark. There is something ancient about shared sleep. It reminds us that rest, like life, was once a communal thing. That comfort came not only from blankets and pillows, but from breath beside breath, from the knowledge that as the night deepened, we were not alone. And so, through the centuries, people lay side by side, on straw, on wood, on cloth, beneath stars or ceilings, sharing warmth, stories, and silence, letting the night settle in around them, letting sleep come together.
Today, most of us take for granted the idea of a mattress, a soft pillow, or a warm blanket. But for most of history, people slept on far simpler surfaces, whatever materials were nearby, whatever could be shaped and softened by hand. A bed was not always a frame or a box, but often just a place made with care and a little comfort. In the earliest times, people likely slept on the bare ground, perhaps with only leaves or grass piled beneath them. Over time, as shelters were built, so were places to rest. Mats were woven from reeds or straw. Animal hides were stretched across the floor. These simple beds offered a layer between the body and the earth, keeping out the cold and the damp. In ancient Egypt, raised wooden frames were common among the wealthy. Some were angled slightly, with a footboard and even a built-in headrest. But for the poor, sleep came on woven mats or packed earth. A rolled-up cloth might serve as a pillow.
In both cases, sleep was something shaped by necessity, modest and functional. The Romans developed more elaborate bedding. Wealthy households used wooden or metal frames topped with ropes or slats over which mattresses were laid. These mattresses were often filled with feathers, straw, or wool. Covers were made from linen or cotton, sometimes dyed or embroidered. Yet even in grand Roman villas, many slept on simple benches or floor mats. Softness was a luxury, not a standard. In medieval Europe, the bed became a symbol of status. The very rich had large wooden frames, sometimes canopied, with curtains that could be drawn for warmth and privacy. The mattress might be stuffed with feathers or down, but for most people, bedding remained humble. A straw tick, perhaps filled with hay or reeds, laid directly on the floor or a low frame. Straw beds were common across much of history. The straw had to be changed regularly, as it would flatten or grow musty over time. Some added dried herbs to the straw, lavender, thyme, or chamomile, not only for fragrance but to discourage insects. This blend was called a herbal bed and was especially valued in colder seasons. Pillows were once rare. In some cultures, only the wealthy used them. Others believed that sleeping flat was better for the body. In China, headrests made from wood or ceramic were used, keeping the head elevated and the hair in place. These pillow substitutes were cool in the summer and believed to aid posture and health. Blankets varied widely by region. In colder places, furs and thick woolen wraps were used. In warmer regions, cotton cloths or light quilts provided enough cover. Some families had only one or two heavy blankets, shared among all sleepers on the coldest nights. These were often handmade, patched and repatched, passed down from one generation to the next. In Japan, traditional bedding took a different form. People slept on tatami mats made of woven straw, topped with thin futons that were folded and stored away each morning. This allowed for flexible living spaces. Rooms could be used for sleep at night and other activities by day. The practice still continues, a blend of tradition and practicality. Among nomadic peoples, bedding had to be portable. Rolls of felt, wool, or skins were carried along with other supplies. A bed might be unrolled on the floor of a tent, beside a fire, or under open sky. Comfort came not from thickness, but from familiarity. A blanket that smelled of home, a pillow shaped by long use. Even in castles and palaces, comfort had its limits. Mattresses were heavy. Linen had to be washed by hand, down and feathers shifted inside their cases, and during the coldest months, even the grandest beds could not keep out every draft. People slept in layers, wrapped in nightclothes under several blankets, with caps on their heads and socks on their feet. In rural cottages, beds were often built into the wall. These box beds had wooden panels and sometimes even small doors that could be closed at night. They kept out the cold and gave a sense of privacy, especially in homes where space was shared by many. Children loved them for the sense of being tucked away, hidden and warm. Some homes used benches that doubled as beds. Others had nothing more than a pile of folded cloth in the corner, arranged at night and rolled up again each morning. Bedding was a flexible idea, something you built and rebuilt each day according to need. And yet, despite the materials or designs, people slept. They adjusted. They made do. A straw bed could still feel soft after a long day. A fur blanket could still offer comfort on a stormy night. Sleep didn't ask for perfection, only for stillness and warmth. Today, we measure beds in inches and foam layers. We seek orthopedic support, memory foam, cooling covers. But in the quiet spaces of history, rest was simpler. A mat, a blanket, a place to lie down. And perhaps in some way, that made sleep easier, because comfort came not from the softness of a mattress, but from knowing the day was done, that the hearth had cooled, that someone nearby had already drifted off, and that wherever you laid your head, on straw, on wool, or on wood,
rest would still come. For as long as people have closed their eyes at night, they have wondered about the strange world behind their eyelids. Dreams, those drifting images, voices, and scenes, have always been part of the sleeping experience. But what they meant and how they were understood has changed greatly across time and culture. In the ancient world, dreams were rarely seen as random. People believed they carried meaning, messages from the gods, glimpses of the future, or echoes of hidden thoughts. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets recorded dreams as part of royal archives. Kings consulted dream interpreters who could read symbols and offer warnings or guidance. A snake in a dream might mean betrayal. A bird might mean freedom. Every image held a message. Egyptians believed dreams connected them to the divine. Temples were built where people could sleep in sacred silence, hoping to receive visions during the night. These places were quiet, dark, and filled with incense, spaces where the boundary between waking and dreaming felt thin. Priests studied these dreams carefully. If someone dreamed of walking into the Nile, it might mean purification. If they dreamed of fire, it might mean change. The Greeks took a similar approach. In the temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, people would lie down to sleep in hopes of receiving cures in dreams. This practice was called incubation. Those who dreamed of the god were believed to be blessed. Physicians sometimes based their treatment on what a patient had seen during the night. In ancient China, dreams were thought to be journeys of the soul. While the body rested, the soul wandered. It could visit ancestors, receive wisdom, or witness events in other realms. Some warned against waking too suddenly, believing it could disrupt the soul's return. Dreams were recorded in books, studied for signs, and sometimes shared only with the wise. In Africa, Australia, and the Americas, indigenous traditions also held dreams as sacred. For some, dreams were part of initiation, signs of spiritual growth. For others, they were ways to connect with nature, animals, or the spirits of those who had passed on. A dream of a deer might mean patience. A dream of a storm could bring a warning. Elders listened closely when children spoke of dreams. Medieval Europe was more cautious. Dreams could be seen as divine messages, but also as temptations or tricks. Some people feared dreams, believing they opened the mind to evil. Others kept dream journals, hoping to decode patterns. A dream of falling might be a warning. A dream of flying, a sign of pride. Church leaders debated whether dreams came from God or from the self, or from somewhere darker. Still, many ordinary people trusted their dreams. A woman dreaming of fish might believe someone close was pregnant. A farmer dreaming of broken tools might prepare for trouble in the field. Superstitions and folk wisdom filled the space where official teachings were silent. Dream books, small and handwritten, passed through families, full of symbols and meanings. During the Renaissance, thinkers began to question dreams more deeply. Were they the mind's voice, a reflection of memory, or simply nonsense? Physicians and philosophers studied sleep and dreams, recording what they experienced. Some believed that dreams helped the brain sort through ideas. Others still believed in hidden messages. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, dream study became a science, or tried to. Figures like Freud and Jung wrote volumes on the meaning of dreams. Freud believed they revealed buried desires. Jung believed they revealed symbols shared across humanity. Their theories shaped how many people still think of dreams today, not as magic, but as reflections of our inner life. But long before psychology, people already knew that dreams mattered. They remembered the ones that lingered. They repeated them to friends. They tried to forget the ones that frightened them. They made decisions, large and small, based on what they saw during sleep. Some dreamed of lost loved ones and woke with a softened heart. Others dreamed of journeys and woke with a longing for change. Some awoke confused, others smiling. Dreams were never fully trusted, but rarely ignored. In many traditions, people began the day by thinking quietly about what they had seen in sleep. They didn't rush. They let the images rise slowly like mist lifting from a field.
They asked themselves, was that just a dream, or was it something more? Children were often told not to share nightmares aloud, lest they become true. But good dreams, however, those were encouraged. Tales of flying, of speaking with animals, of finding treasures. Parents smiled and said, perhaps it will come true one day. Even now, dreams continue to shape us. We wake with pieces of them, like feathers caught in our hands. Sometimes they drift away. Sometimes they stay all day. A strange face, a familiar voice, a place that never was. We don't always know what they mean, but they remain with us, gentle and persistent. And so, across the ages, as people laid down their heads and drifted into sleep, they entered the same mysterious space, a place both familiar and unknown, a world made of memory, hope, and quiet fears, a place where stories unfold without end. What happens there? No one truly knows, but still we go, each night, eyes closed, breath slow, slipping gently into that ancient, silent world of dreams.
Long before alarms, earplugs, or white noise machines, people slept with the natural sounds of night. These sounds were not distractions. They were companions, gentle reminders that the world continued turning, even while eyes were closed and minds began to drift. In the countryside, night was never truly silent. Crickets chirped softly from the fields, frogs croaked from nearby ponds, the wind whispered through tall grass or rustled dry leaves. These sounds, steady and familiar, created a rhythm, a soft lullaby offered by the world itself. The creaking of wooden beams overhead, the settling of a thatched roof, or the distant bark of a dog helped fill the space between dreams. These were not disruptions, but signs that life was still there, quietly moving just outside the door. Inside the home, there were other sounds. The crackling of a fire, slowly burning down to embers. The slow breath of a sleeping child. The soft turning of a body under a blanket. In one-room homes, these sounds overlapped and mingled, layers of restfulness shared among those who slept together. In villages and towns, sounds changed slightly. Hoofbeats on cobbled streets signaled a late traveler. A church bell might ring once, marking the hour. Sometimes the watchman called out from the edge of the square, his voice echoing against stone walls. All is well. That reassurance, heard in the dark, allowed many to turn over and sleep more deeply. In coastal places, sleep was joined by the sea. The gentle push and pull of waves, the cry of a night bird far off over the water. Ships rocking in their moorings, wood groaning softly with the tide. These sounds folded into dreams, anchoring the body to something older and slower than time itself. In the desert, sleep arrived with silence, but not emptiness. The wind moved across sand, carrying with it the faintest hum. Animals stirred in the distance. A camel groaned. A flame flickered in a small lamp. This was a different kind of night music, minimal, spacious, and deep. In colder lands, where snow covered the ground and muffled every sound, night fell heavily. The crack of ice shifting on a river, the groan of frozen wood, but mostly stillness. A stillness so complete it almost had a sound of its own. Sleep came easily in that hush, as if the world had drawn a thick blanket over itself. Not all night sounds were peaceful. Wolves howled, owls screeched, storms rattled shutters and blew smoke back down chimneys. But even those sounds had meaning. They reminded people to stay near the fire, to keep loved ones close, to trust in the shelter they had built together. In large households, night sounds became part of the rhythm of family life. A baby stirred. Someone coughed. A floorboard creaked beneath cautious steps. People grew used to these sounds. They learned which to wake for and which to let pass like a wave on the shore. In castles, palaces, or manor houses, the night had its own voice. The hum of distant voices, the shuffle of servants moving quietly down long corridors. the clink of metal cooling in the kitchens. In such places, sleep was accompanied by the slow heartbeat of an entire household. For travelers on the road, night sounds changed with every stop. A river beside a tent, the chirp of insects, the cracking of twigs, a horse shifting its weight nearby. Sleep came cautiously at first, then more easily once the patterns were known. These sounds, though strange at first, often became welcome friends. In monasteries, the night was deeply quiet. Monks slept in rows, their breath rising and falling like waves. Bells might ring for early prayers before the sun rose, but before that, all was still. The silence itself became a sound, a presence so constant it cradled the soul. Children often found comfort in the night's noises. The way the wind tapped gently at the shutters, the hum of voices in another room, a lullaby sung softly again and again until it faded into sleep. These memories stayed, even into old age, woven into the fabric of what rest feels like. As people aged, they often became more aware of night sounds again. The ticking of a clock, the sigh of wind, the quiet hum of pipes or trees or faraway traffic. These gentle reminders of the world's presence could be oddly comforting, proof that one is not alone. In every corner of the world, through every century, people have fallen asleep not in silence, but in sound, and not in fear of those sounds, but in harmony with them. The rhythms of the night have always shaped how we sleep and how we dream. Even now, with all our devices and walls and insulation, some part of us still listens. We hear the hum of the fridge, the soft whoosh of a car passing, the whisper of rain on glass. We close our eyes, and those sounds wrap around us like a familiar blanket. And as we drift off, the night continues on, softly, steadily, quietly keeping watch. Long before electric lights, phone screens, and late-night news, people had slower evenings, times shaped by repetition, quiet, and care. The end of the day was not rushed. It followed a rhythm, a soft winding down that helped prepare the mind and body for sleep. These were the rituals before sleep, simple acts, repeated over and over, not because they were exciting, but because they worked. They signaled to the brain, the day is over and rest is near. In small cottages, the first sign of night came with the dimming of the fire. Coals were pushed gently together, embers raked and covered in ash to keep them smoldering through the dark. The light faded slowly, casting soft shadows across wooden beams and stone walls. It was a natural cue, a silent invitation to quiet. Children were called in from the fields or brought in from play. Faces and hands were washed with warm water. A cloth dampened, a basin filled. The sounds of laughter gave way to yawns. Voices softened. Parents whispered stories or said short prayers, tucking children under blankets made thin with use but warm with care. Adults had their own rituals. Boots were placed by the door, tools were put away, a final check on the animals was made, a candle lit, then another, maybe a final sip of water or tea, and always the same gentle tasks, folding clothes, brushing out hair, smoothing out the bed. In some homes, songs were sung, lullabies passed down through generations, simple tunes, gentle words, some about stars, some about sleep itself. Just a few notes hummed quietly could slow a heart, ease a mind, and signal that dreams were near. In religious households, prayers were often the last words spoken each day. Heads bowed, eyes closed, not rushed, not grand, just a few lines of gratitude or a request for peace through the night. These prayers were a way of letting go, of saying, "This day is finished. I've done what I could." In many cultures, sleep came with smells. Herbs hung near the bed,
lavender, rosemary, thyme. The scent calmed the nerves. In some places, small pouches of dried flowers were placed beneath pillows. Elsewhere, incense was burned for a moment, sending up a quiet ribbon of smoke. Light was always part of the ritual, not bright, but soft. Oil lamps, candles, or nothing at all. People knew how to let the dark come gradually. They let it spread across walls, over hands and faces, until it folded the world into quiet. No switches, no blue light, just darkness arriving like an old friend. In colder months, blankets were warmed by the fire. Bricks or stones were heated and wrapped in cloth, placed at the foot of the bed. Sometimes people wore nightcaps or layered woolen socks, not out of fashion, but to keep the warmth close. Even these small acts, tucking in a corner, folding a shawl, were part of the sleep ritual. For those who lived alone, the rituals still mattered. They were quiet companions, lighting a single candle, closing a window, whispering good night to no one in particular. These motions brought order to the evening, a kind of peace. In larger homes, rituals were shared. The house slowly hushed, doors closed gently, floors creaked under practiced feet. In castles and grand estates, servants moved through halls, snuffing out candles, checking locks, drawing curtains. In the great silence that followed, sleep arrived more easily. Some read before bed, by firelight or lamp, a Bible, a poem, a letter from a loved one. The active reading slowed the breath, brought the mind away from labor or worry. It helped the body remember, it's time now. The day has given all it could. Others stitched by the hearth, mending clothes, working slowly, letting hands move in rhythm until eyes grew heavy. These were not chores, but habits of transition, moments that bridged the waking and sleeping world. Even washing before sleep had its place. A basin of warm water, a clean cloth, not a full bath, but a rinsing of the day. Hands, face, sometimes feet. The water cooled slowly as the fire died down. The night wrapped closer. Across cultures and centuries, the details of these rituals changed, but the intention was always the same: to ease the body and calm the mind, to let go of worry, of noise, of work, and to enter sleep not as a fall, but as a gentle descent. Some ended the day with silence, no words, no songs, just the sound of breath and night. Others ended with a final conversation, a soft good night spoken to someone nearby, or even to the darkness itself. It was a way of acknowledging that rest had arrived. These rituals, small, unremarkable, easily forgotten in history books, shaped how people slept. They gave the body cues. They told the mind, you are safe now. You've done enough. And even now, in our modern world, we still seek these rituals. A cup of tea, a low lamp, a familiar book, a few minutes of stillness before bed. The shapes may change, but the need remains. Because no matter how much time passes, the body still longs for the same things at the end of the day: warmth, quiet, and a gentle path toward sleep. For as long as people have fallen ill, they've turned to sleep for healing. Long before medicines, before thermometers or clinics, the first advice was simple: lie down, rest, and sleep if you can. Across centuries, sleep was not just a comfort, it was a remedy, a gentle, natural medicine known to all. In old villages and towns, when someone felt feverish or weak, neighbors would say, "He needs a good sleep." The sick were wrapped in warm cloth, placed near the hearth, and left to drift in and out of slumber. Even without a clear diagnosis, people knew rest helped the body fight. During plagues and epidemics, there was often little to do but wait and sleep. Herbal infusions were offered, cool cloths placed on brows, but mostly silence was kept. The ill were given time to drift, the house quieted around them. Those who survived often recalled the long, strange dreams they had while sick, visions that blurred the edge of sleep and waking. In homes with few resources, care was simple but heartfelt. A mother sat beside a child, wiping their face. A friend brought broth. Beds were fluffed, even if only straw. And time passed, measured not by clocks, but by breathing. Slow, shallow, then deeper again. In monasteries, sleep was part of spiritual healing. The sick were allowed to stay in warm rooms, given extra blankets, and allowed longer rest than usual. Gentle voices read psalms beside them. The idea was that both the body and soul might mend, one through stillness, the other through prayer. Among the wealthy, sick rooms were set aside, quiet spaces with heavy curtains, extra pillows, and special sheets. Servants moved softly, doctors came and went. But even in luxury, the advice stayed the same: let them sleep. People noticed that after a long illness, the body often needed days, sometimes weeks, of extra sleep to fully return. These weren't lazy days, they were rebuilding days. Rest was seen as the final stage of healing, just as important as the first. In colder seasons, when flu and chills moved through homes, sleep became a shared remedy. Families huddled closer, beds were made with extra furs, soups were made thicker, and people let each other rest. Even children were told, "Let your sister sleep, she'll feel better in the morning." Herbalists often mixed plants not just for pain but for sleep. Valerian, hops, chamomile, lemon balm, these were not modern inventions, they were known long ago. A cup of warm tea made with crushed leaves, a cloth soaked in calming tincture, these quiet preparations were passed down gently, without fanfare. In some cultures, it was believed that dreams during illness could reveal the cause or the cure. A vivid dream of water might suggest the body needed cooling. A dream of animals might hold some hidden symbolism. While modern science has moved beyond these ideas, the dream world of the ill was once seen as meaningful, even sacred. For those nearing death, sleep often became the main state of being. Families gathered near, holding hands, listening to breathing. Sleep and wakefulness blended together. In this space, sleep was not feared, it was softened, a way to ease from one world to the next. After recovery, people often spoke of the sleep that healed me. It wasn't just rest, they said. It was deep, full, uninterrupted. That kind of sleep felt different, heavier, more complete. It left the skin clearer, the mind quieter. And many believed that such sleep was a gift, not easily found. In times of war or famine, sleep was harder to come by. Yet even then, the wounded were placed wherever they could lie down, in tents, under trees, beside fires. Sleep was fragile but treasured. A soldier who could sleep for an hour was envied. A mother who could coax her child into sleep during hardship felt some small victory. Across time, healers knew that sleep and illness were intertwined. A body deprived of rest weakened quickly. A mind lacking sleep grew confused. And so, before any cure was offered, rest was prescribed, not always by doctors, but by grandmothers, by neighbors, by those who understood what the body needed most. The sick bed became a familiar place in every household. Whether made of feathers or hay, it served the same purpose. It held the body as it struggled. It gathered sweat, tears, sighs. It cradled those in fever and those on the mend. And through it all, sleep was the thread that ran gently through each hour. Today, with all our medicine, we still rely on sleep to heal. We are told to rest after surgeries, to sleep through recovery, to take things slow. Hospitals dim their lights, nurses speak softly, and still, families say, just sleep. It will help. Because no matter how far we've come, the body remembers what it always knew. That sleep is not a weakness, but a gift. A way to mend what's torn, to ease what aches, and to return, slowly, gently, to the world once more.
Not every night in history was spent in one's own bed. Often, people found themselves sleeping far from home, on roads, in strange towns, in borrowed rooms. And when they did, they adapted.
because sleep, like water and food, could not be postponed forever. Travel was slower then. A journey that now takes hours once required days, even weeks. Merchants, pilgrims, messengers, and wanderers had to find rest wherever they could, sometimes under the stars, sometimes in a stranger's barn, and sometimes in the rough corners of a noisy inn. The roadside was the first option for many, a patch of grass, a clearing by the trees. Travelers unrolled woolen cloaks, laid their heads on saddlebags, and listened to the night. The earth was not soft, but it was familiar. The stars above were constant companions. Fires were built when possible. One person might stay awake to keep watch, but when exhaustion settled in, sleep came anyway, brief and light, but enough. In more settled areas, travelers looked for shelter. Inns and taverns offered a place to sleep for a price, but it wasn't always private or clean. In medieval inns, guests often shared a room and a bed. You paid for the right to lie down, not for solitude. A bed might hold 2 or 3 strangers. Feet met feet. Heads faced opposite directions. You might hear snores, mumbles, or midnight shifting, but you learned to let it pass. Some inns provided little more than a blanket and a bench. Others had straw pallets on the floor or wooden bunks against the walls. Privacy was a luxury few could afford, but for those on the road, even a hard bed beneath a dry roof was a gift. Hospitality was not limited to businesses. In many towns, homes welcomed travelers, especially those with a letter of introduction or a holy purpose. A pilgrim might knock and be given a space near the hearth. A traveling doctor might be offered the barn. And guests, in return, brought news, songs, or stories from distant places. In wealthier homes, guest beds were prepared with care. Sheets were aired, towels laid out, a chamber pot set discreetly nearby. Candles were left burning low. These courtesies smoothed the discomfort of sleeping in an unfamiliar place. Hosts offered warm food and sometimes warm stones to place at the foot of the bed. Among nomadic people, the concept of sleeping away from home was less clear. Home was wherever the tent was set. Yurts, for example, held families and guests alike. Beds were made of thick felt or rugs, rolled out freshly each evening. Guests were honored with the best spots, nearest to warmth. Stories were shared before sleep, tea brewed, then silence fell, and all rested beneath the same roof of stars and fabric. On ships, sleep was shaped by waves. Sailors rested in narrow hammocks, swinging gently with the ocean's rhythm. Below deck, light was dim, air was thick, but sleep came in shifts, brief and broken, yet essential. Travelers in cabins fared better, though even there the creaking wood and constant motion made sleep uncertain. In military camps, sleep was scarce. Soldiers lay on the ground, cloaks pulled tight, weapons nearby. Fires burned low. Someone always kept watch. Sleep was light, ears always open. Yet in the darkest hours before dawn, many managed a few moments of real rest. A kind of shared silence settled across the field, broken only by the wind or the snort of a horse. In religious pilgrims often slept in churches or abbeys. Stone floors softened by straw mats, cloaks pulled up around shoulders, and while the air was cold, there was comfort in sacred space. Bells might ring during the night or prayers be whispered nearby, but sleep, when it came, felt blessed. In the colder regions, travelers knew to seek shelter before nightfall. Snow was unforgiving. A small hut, a hollow tree, even a wind-blocking rock could save a life. Fires were essential. Companions huddled together, and in the flickering light, even the most temporary bed could feel like home. Children learned young how to sleep on the move. In carts, cradled in arms, were nestled against their mother's back. They dozed through long walks, dusty roads, or noisy markets. Their ability to sleep anywhere often amazed adults, but perhaps they understood something we forget, that sleep comes more from feeling safe than from softness. Over time, travelers created their own small comforts. A scarf folded just so became a pillow, a pouch of herbs to tuck beneath the chin, a ritual, checking boots, drinking a last sip of water, humming a quiet tune. These patterns anchored the traveler, made the strange feel less strange. Letters from long ago sometimes mention sleep well away. A daughter writing home might say, "The bed was rough, but I dreamed of home." A sailor might write, Last night, I slept beneath the sails and the wind sang me to sleep. These lines remind us that even when far away, sleep still finds us. Because no matter where we are, in a castle or a carriage, in a tent or a tavern, our bodies carry the same need. And the sky above is the same, and the dark still comes, wrapping us in its quiet, asking only that we close our eyes and let go. In the quiet of night, long before private bedrooms and personal space became normal, people often slept side by side. Sleep was not always a solitary act. It was shared between family members, between friends, and sometimes even with strangers. A single bed might hold a mother and her children. A wooden platform might sleep a whole family, feet pointing in, shoulders touching. In small cottages, space was scarce. Privacy, as we know it today, was rare. But warmth, safety, and togetherness, those were valued more. In medieval villages, homes often had just one or two sleeping areas. Parents, children, even grandparents shared beds. Babies were kept close to the mother for feeding. Children snuggled into the crook of an older sibling's back. Sleep came slowly, but with comfort in every breath and body nearby. People knew each other's rhythms: a cough in the night, a soft murmur from a dream, the shifting of blankets. These were not disturbances, they were familiar sounds, part of the nighttime world. A shared breath, a shared warmth. In colder climates, sleeping together meant survival. A single fire could only warm so much. Bodies pressed close helped hold in the heat. Even animals were sometimes brought in. Dogs curled at the foot of the bed. In some places, goats or pigs were near enough to share their body heat too. Travelers also shared beds. In crowded inns, one might wake up beside a stranger. There was no scandal, only necessity. People turned in opposite directions, back to back. A blanket might be shared, but not a word exchanged. It was a practical arrangement, born of a world with fewer walls. In servants' quarters, multiple people often shared a mattress on the floor. The youngest slept along the edge, the elder workers in the center. Clothes became pillows, blankets were shared without question. And in the dark, stories were sometimes whispered. Memories of home, of someone missed, or a song from childhood. Even in grander homes, shared sleep was not uncommon. Children of nobility might sleep together in long, curtained beds. Servants shared bunks. Guests sometimes doubled up. And behind all the wealth, the human need for warmth remained the same. Among travelers, the tradition of bundling existed in some regions. Two people, often potential marriage partners, would share a bed, fully clothed, sometimes with a board or bolster between them. This was less about passion and more about conversation, about learning the rhythms of another's sleep, their breath, their silence. In some cultures, women slept in one area, men in another. But even within those spaces, sleep was a shared experience. Mats or blankets laid out in rows, a soft hum of quiet talk as the lights dimmed. Then the hush of dreams settling in across many at once. Children often fell asleep beside their parents, then slowly moved to their own corner of the room as they grew. But the connection remained. The sounds of breathing, the comfort of knowing someone was close, shaped their understanding of safety. Illness brought people closer at night. A sibling held the hand of another with fever. A mother sat beside a sick child, resting her head nearby. In grief, people sometimes slept together for weeks, not to escape sorrow, but to feel less alone inside it. Festivals and gatherings brought crowds into close quarters. People wrapped in cloaks, laying side by side under the stars. After dancing or prayer, laughter and talk would quiet, and sleep would spread slowly across fields or temples or shared shelters. Even imprisonment or war could not erase this closeness. Prisoners huddled together for warmth. Soldiers lay side by side in trenches. In the hardest places, sleep became an act of endurance, but also of trust. You rested, knowing someone was next to you, awake or asleep, sharing the same space, the same vulnerability. This shared sleep taught people patience. The squeak of a bed frame, a restless limb, the sigh of someone thinking in the dark. All of these were accepted, even cherished, because they were part of being together in the night. Of course, there were tensions. Not everyone slept easily with others, but over time, people learned how to adjust, how to shift quietly, how to breathe without disturbing, how to create a rhythm that folded into the group. As homes grew larger and more private, shared sleeping declined. Bedrooms became separate, beds became personal, and with that came quiet benefits. More space, deeper sleep, a sense of retreat. But something was lost too. The shared breath, the quiet talk before dreams, the presence of someone else, near but not demanding. That quiet comfort remains in memory, in stories passed down, and in the deep part of us that still finds peace in not being alone. Today we sometimes recreate it. A grandchild dozing on a couch beside a grandparent, friends camping, whispering beneath the stars, couples holding hands as they drift off. These moments echo the long human tradition of sleeping together, not out of luxury, but out of something more gentle: closeness, trust, and warmth. Because through history, sleep was not only about rest, it was also about connection. A shared blanket, a shared silence, a shared dream.
As every night slips slowly into morning, the world begins to stir again. And through history, people have greeted the day in quiet, simple ways that echoed the life they lived, the land they belonged to, and the rhythms of their sleep. Long before alarm clocks, waking happened more gently. Often it was not sound that woke a person, but light. The soft glow of sunrise creeping across a wooden floor, a golden hue rising over a thatched roof, a room slowly changing color from shadow to soft warmth. The body knew it was time, not by a chime, but by the sky. Roosters, of course, were among the first to be heard. Their clear, sharp calls cut through the morning stillness. In villages and farms across the world, this natural signal marked the beginning of motion. Doors creaked open, water was drawn, firewood was stacked beside the hearth. In towns, mornings brought different sounds. Church bells often rang first, their deep tones echoing between stone walls. These were not just calls to prayer, they were signals that the day had begun. A baker's oven creaked to life, a merchant unlatched his door, boots tapped softly on cobblestones. Within homes, waking was slower. A child stirred. A mother lit the fire. Blankets were folded back with care. There were no rushes, no buzzes. People rose with the day, not ahead of it. In many places, waking began with prayer or gratitude. A few words whispered beside the bed. Eyes closed again, not in sleep, but in reflection. These small rituals helped stretch the boundary between dreaming and doing, offering a soft welcome into wakefulness. Some families shared the morning bed for a while. A parent might stay a moment longer beside a sleepy child, humming softly or smoothing their hair. The room was still dim. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Inside, breath and warmth lingered. Work soon followed, but not always with urgency. In rural areas, farmers first checked the weather, the way the wind moved through the trees, the feel of soil beneath bare feet. Only after this sensing of the world did tasks begin: feeding animals, tending to crops, gathering water. In households with few comforts, mornings were marked by small but necessary movements. A fire relit from embers, a pot of thin porridge stirred slowly, hands rinsed with cool water from a basin, clothes shaken out and layered on in silence. For those in colder regions, morning meant breaking the chill. Frost on windows, breath rising in soft clouds.
Children dressed quickly, fingers fumbling. But even here, there were moments of peace. The way the light hit the snow outside, the crackle of kindling catching flame, the hush before the world truly began. Travelers woke to whatever sounds surrounded them. The snapping of twigs, the flap of canvas, the cough of a fellow wanderer. Mornings on the road were often chilly and brisk, but also filled with the strange joy of movement, the day ahead full of unknown paths and open skies. In monasteries and temples, waking came with bells or chants. The sound was soft, measured. Monks arose from simple beds, moved in rhythm with each other. No one rushed. The morning was sacred, slow, and filled with intention. Children, when left to wake on their own, did so gradually. A stretch, a blink, a smile, sometimes a small protest, a roll back under the covers. But once up, they moved easily into the day, already full of stories and thoughts from dreams just ended. In many cultures, morning food was light and warm. A piece of bread, a spoonful of stew, a cup of herbal tea. Eating was done quietly, often sitting near a window or hearth. Conversation was gentle. The world had only just begun to wake. There was no need to fill it with noise. Even in grand homes with servants and silver trays, the morning kept its hush. Doors were opened gently. Hot water brought in without a word. Letters placed on a table. Light filtered through thick curtains. The pace remained unhurried. Morning, in these older times, was not something to beat or conquer. It was something to join. People rose with the day, not against it. They allowed the world to open slowly. They let the body catch up with the light. And if someone woke before others, they often stayed quiet, watching the fire, listening to birdsong, letting thoughts drift like mist across a lake. These were precious moments, free of duty, free of speech, just quiet before footsteps returned and the work of living resumed. Even now, some people seek to return to those kinds of mornings. They rise without alarms. They wait a moment before checking the time. They notice the air, the sounds, the light. They take their coffee slowly. They move without rush. Because within us, the old mornings still live. The kind marked by quiet, by simple tasks, by shared spaces and soft words. The kind where waking was not abrupt, but gradual and unfolding. And perhaps that is why we still crave slow mornings. Mornings where we can feel the warmth of a blanket just a moment longer, where the world waits patiently, where nothing demands our attention except the next breath. Because long before the noise of modern life, that is how waking felt, calm, steady, and quietly alive. Long before the science of sleep, before charts and brain waves and sleep cycles, people wondered about their dreams. They watched them float into the night, soft and strange, and they gave them meaning, not through logic, but through quiet belief. For as long as there has been sleep, there have been dreams. And for just as long, people have asked the same gentle questions. What do they mean? Where do they come from? Why do some stay with us so long, while others fade before morning light? In the ancient world, dreams were often seen as messages. In Egypt, temples were built where people came not only to pray, but to dream. They lay down on stone beds, waiting for a vision. A god might appear in sleep, offering guidance, healing, or warning. These dreams were recorded by priests, carved into stone or written on scrolls. Greek philosophers, too, considered dreams with wonder. Some thought they were the soul wandering free while the body rested. Others believed they reflected desires or fears, truths hidden during the day but revealed at night. In Rome, dreams were taken seriously enough that emperors kept dream interpreters in their courts. A vivid image, a lion, a falling star, a sudden storm, might be read as a sign. Decisions were delayed, battles postponed, all because of something glimpsed in a dream. Among common folk, dreams were part of daily life. A mother might wake from a strange dream and keep her child home from the fields. A farmer might dream of a bountiful harvest and plant with extra care. These weren't superstitions, they were simply ways of listening to what sleep had whispered. In many cultures, dreams of loved ones were seen as visits. A departed parent or spouse appearing in sleep was not dismissed, it was held close, cherished. These dream visits brought comfort, even when words were few. A silent presence, a familiar face, a feeling of peace. Nightmares, too, were understood with care. In some places, they were blamed on spirits or bad winds. Doors were marked with chalk. Herbs were hung near the bed. In others, prayers were said before sleep, asking for protection through the night. Children were told stories of dream creatures, some kind, some mischievous. These tales helped them understand the strange world behind their eyelids. They learned not to fear every image, but to see dreams as a place where the mind wandered and played. In medieval Europe, dream books were passed around, thick with symbols and interpretations. A snake meant betrayal. A bird meant freedom. A broken cup meant trouble ahead. People looked up their dreams in the morning, tracing the meanings like a map. Yet, not all dreams were read. Many were simply accepted, odd, fleeting, but somehow beautiful. A field of stars, a house with endless rooms, a song never heard before, sung in a voice no one remembered. These dreams were not explained, they were simply remembered. Some dreams returned again and again, the same road, the same door, the same sound. People wondered what these meant and whether they were messages from the soul or just echoes of long-forgotten memories. In some parts of the world, dreams were shared in the morning. Families sat together, drinking tea, and told what they had seen. Not as omens always, but as stories. A way of staying close, of understanding one another without asking too much. For those who were ill, dreams took on new shapes. Fevers brought vivid scenes, colors too bright, voices too near. These dreams blurred the edge between waking and sleeping. Some said they traveled, floating above their bodies or speaking with ancestors. True or not, these stories brought comfort. Monks and mystics sometimes used dreams as part of their practice. They believed the silence of night opened doors the day could not. Dreams became a space for reflection, for listening to the quiet voice within. Even today, we wake from dreams that linger, a face we haven't seen in years, a place we've never been, a feeling we can't explain. And for a moment, we lie still, trying to hold on to it, knowing it will slip away. Science tells us now that dreams are the brain sorting, organizing, protecting. But even knowing this, they remain mysterious. They move in symbols, they speak in fragments, and they still carry emotion deeper than reason. Perhaps that is why dreams have mattered so much through history. They are not bound by time or logic. In sleep, a child can fly. An elder can run again. A door opens to a memory long buried. A question is asked, though no answer comes. And always, morning comes. The dream fades, but a trace remains. A whisper in the heart. A feeling that something important passed by while we rested. So we keep dreaming, as our ancestors did. We close our eyes and let the world behind the world open. We do not always understand what we find there, but we know it is ours. Because sleep is not just rest, it is a journey, and dreams are the language of that journey.
And so the long night continues. Across the centuries, across quiet rooms and windswept fields,
through palaces and cottages, through hammocks, mats, and beds of straw, people have laid themselves down again and again into sleep. Each night, no matter the age or place, the same gentle ritual unfolds. A breath slows, a hand smooths the blanket, eyes close, and the world drifts away. Though the ways people have slept have changed, the beds softer, the rooms quieter, the clocks louder, the deep truth has not. We still need the night. We still long for it, and we still enter it with something very old in us, a desire not just to rest, but to let go. In the great hush of the world after dark, there is a kind of remembering, a returning. The mind releases its weight, the heart softens its hold, and the body, tired and grateful, gives itself to sleep like a gift being offered to something bigger than itself. This is something our ancestors knew, even without words. They knew it in the way they folded their arms beneath their heads, in the way they wrapped a child close, in the way they murmured prayers or listened to the wind or counted stars through a thatched roof. They knew, perhaps better than we do now, that sleep was not a thing to chase or control. It was a guest to welcome, a river to step into, a silence to join. They slept to the rhythms of firelight and fading song, to the creak of wood, the whisper of straw, the soft shifting of someone breathing nearby. They slept not to escape life, but to return to something gentle within it. And even now, even with our machines and glowing screens and endless noise, we still try, every night, to find that same stillness, to draw the blanket higher, to turn off the light, to close our eyes and follow that long, quiet path inward. Sleep is one of the few things that connects us all, the poor and the powerful, the young and the old, the lost and the found. All of us lie down eventually. All of us seek that same peace. It is humbling, in a way, to know that no matter how much changes in the world, this one thing remains. Night comes, and we sleep. And within that sleep, the long story continues. A story told not in words, but in rhythm, in stillness, in breath. Tonight, someone will sleep in a wide bed, with a lamp glowing gently beside them. Someone else will rest on a bench in a quiet station, their bag beneath their head. A mother will rock her baby. An elder will lie still in thought. And all of them will give themselves, quietly, to sleep. Some will dream, some will not. Some will wake often, others will sleep deeply. And all of it will be part of the same shared experience that has repeated across time, night after night, generation after generation. This long history of sleep is not finished. It is still being written in your sleep, in mine, in the way we ease into bed, adjust the covers, let go of the day. We are part of that history, not as kings or scholars, but simply as human beings, closing our eyes at the end of a long day, hoping for rest and trusting that sleep will come. So now, let the day fall behind you. Let the past grow quiet. There is nothing more to do, nothing to fix, nothing to carry. You have listened gently to stories of how others once slept. Now, it is your turn. Feel the weight of your body, the quiet around you, the slow rhythm of breath rising and falling like the sea. This is your night, your time to soften, to release, to drift. And perhaps as you fall slowly into sleep, you'll feel yourself joining that great, quiet story, stretching back through time, filled with dreamers and wanderers, with farmers, scholars, children and elders, a long line of people who, like you, once folded their hands, closed their eyes, and let themselves fall into peace. Sleep well, and let the history continue.